Hey, it's Conrad Thompson, and you're listening to Something to Wrestle with John Layfield. John, what's going on, man? How are you?
Conrad, I'm like a big fat kid in a pizza factory, happy as I can be.
Man, I love the sound of that. A big fat kid in a pizza factory. I'm halfway there. We greatly appreciate all of you being with us today because we're going to be talking about the Dudley Boyz. I'm fired up to talk about the Dudley Boyz today, John, because they're one of my, if not my favorite tag team of all time. They're up there. I was a big ECW fan, loved their stuff. Bubba Ray Dudley, man, he was cutting promos on people that felt like, man, I don't think you can say that on TV because you couldn't. I mean,
Right.
I was in love with this presentation because it was so over the top. We're going to be talking about the good, the bad, and the ugly of the Dudley Boyz, and we hope you'll hang around with us. And if you've got a question for John, keep them coming. We are live on YouTube right now at somethingtowrestle.com. And we hope that you will go hit the subscribe button, turn on the notifications bell. You won't miss us the next time we're live. And you can ask John anything. I do want to ask you right from the start, John, like, did you get a chance to see the Dudleys in ECW at all? Or is your first introduction to them once they're in the WWE?
I saw him just a hair. You know, again, and I've mentioned this before, we worked every night, so we didn't see much WCW. We saw a little WCW because they ran head-to-head with us, and you'd have Howard Finkel, you know, in Gorilla, and he'd have the WCW show on, the WCW feed on, because sometimes we would actually change program depending what they were doing. So we'd see a little bit of WCW because it was on a monitor. We didn't see much ECW because we were working every night, you know. So all you'd see is some clips, and that was way before social media. So you didn't see a lot of clips like you see now, where you can just kind of catch up with the show by watching clips.
I really enjoyed the ECW presentation, and it was a little. And what's interesting to me about the Dudley presentation is, I think most people agree it started out as more of a comedy presentation. You had Bubba doing the stutter, and you had the tie dye, and there's all these mismatched family members. I mean, look at that picture if you're with us here on YouTube.
What the hell?
Like, this feels like it's supposed to be a comedy act, but boy, very quickly the Dudleys establish no laughing matter. They become brawling badasses. So yeah, there you see some of the early Dudleys. You got Sign Guy Dudley in the back. I think that's Dances with Dudley in the front. I mean, Studley Dudley. I mean, there's so many. I mean,
whatever happened to the other Dudleys?
That's a great question. You know, in real life, Sign Guy Dudley, he would actually go on to, you may have actually met him before during some of your experiences with TNA. He was working with TNA there for a few years behind the scenes. So, yeah, as far as I know, I don't think any of those guys besides, well, of course, we know Spike. Yep. And we know Bubba, and we know Devon, and Sign Guy Dudley's around a little bit here and there. But, yeah, it's just an interesting presentation. You know, when you think about tag team wrestling, you know, I don't think most people would have ever imagined a tag team like this working. Can you think of another comedy act that became serious? I mean, I know we've seen serious acts like, you know, the Sheep Herders become more comedy later in their career with the Bushwhackers. And we've heard Ric Flair, for instance, say that as his physical skills diminished, he tried to turn up the entertainment with some of the comedies. You'd see like the Flair flop and things like that. But that normally feels like the natural course of things. You start serious and then you end comedy. But this feels like the reverse.
What do you think? It does. And I don't think I've ever seen anything like that. You know, I worked with the Sheep Herders a lot, Bushwhackers a lot, and they were blood and guts team. And, you know, as they got older, you know, they got into comedy and were incredibly over, by the way. The Dudleys did something that I'd never seen anybody do this. You come in there, and the thing is, they just have a lot of talent. That is what it boils down to. You look at what Bubba did as a solo, as a single. Look at what Devon did as a single, as a solo. You know, both these guys have had incredible careers, both as singles, as tags, as comedy acts. They can do anything.
I want to remind everybody that this Dudley act doesn't actually start with Bubba Ray and Devon. I think the initial team was Dudley, which is Jeff Bradley from Florida, and Little Snot Dudley, which was Anthony Michaels from some Northeast independents. And that all happens in July of 95. As the rumor goes, this was supposed to be a Raven idea, or it's inspired by Raven. I guess it was based on a bunch of half brothers and the Hanson brothers in the movie Slapshot. I mean, they've even got the taped up nerd glasses. They're the sons of the traveling salesman. Daddy.
It looks like one of those West Virginia inbred shows is what it looks like.
Do you remember the movie Slapshot? Was that a movie?
Oh my God. Yeah. I love the movie Slapshot. The Hanson brothers, right?
Yes.
Yeah. I love the movie Slapshot. I thought it was great. And I can see where they get inspiration for that. I mean, just two big tough guys that are a little bit out there, a little bit cognitively probably declined, but just fun guys. And that's what the Dudleys portrayed.
The taped up glasses are certainly borrowed from them. And I don't think we do that as much anymore. Maybe I'm wrong, but doesn't it feel like once upon a time, a lot of wrestling creative was born out of what was happening on TV?
Yeah, no doubt about it. I think the whole thing with the anti-hero was born out of TV. I don't think people say wrestling influences culture. I think we mirror culture is probably more like it. I think at times we can influence, but I think a lot of times we mirror culture. You look at what Clint Eastwood did. For the first time, he wasn't just a white hat. Here's a guy who's very mixed, who's got a lot of different layers of gray. And then you look at Rambo. Here's a guy who's an anti-hero. He's very has a lot of issues about why he's that way, about why he's against establishment, and why he's fighting establishment. I mean, you set up a guy fighting the police. That's not something that you would have done back in the 50s.
Right.
That's something you do in the 80s. You go, I get that. There's some bad cops out there. There's this guy who's a war hero. And now all of a sudden, because of what he's been through, he's mad at these guys and he's going to kill all of them. And now you're rooting for the guy to kill the police, because they're bad cops. I get all that. There's a lot more layers to it than that. But I think we mirror a lot of culture more than the culture mirrors us. And I think that's what you're seeing with the Dudleys. And I think it works very well, by the way, Conrad. I think it's done great. Look at Magnum TA. I mean, he was the first, anti-hero we really had in wrestling. He was over like crazy. That got to have been NW champion a long time if it hadn't been for that car wreck. Look at Stone Cold. He came out of the same type thing, the same type Rambo type formula where you have this anti-hero and created one of the biggest angles, if not the biggest in the history of wrestling.
It is interesting you chose Magnum TA there, because clearly Magnum TA with his look and mustache and even the name is a takeoff of Magnum PI.
Yeah.
Dusty Rhodes named Starrcade, and of course Starrcade was actually a television show. And we see the Hanson brother glasses being used by the Dudleys. I bring this point up, John, because I feel like if we were doing some of that stuff today, like I saw recently when they were doing different promotional materials for Blake Monroe, they recreated some photo shoots for Sabrina Carpenter, and it was almost like a shot-for-shot recreation. And the internet had a field day with that, and clearly that's the inspiration. But I see criticisms in the comments about, lack of creativity. And it's like, guys, some of our favorite things were basically ripped off of television. I mean, even Hulk Hogan, Hulk had to pay a licensing fee for years and years for the right to use the name Hulk. So that's not a new thing in wrestling. Even Ric Flair is not the first Nature Boy. Like, inspiration comes from all places, but when it's in the mainstream, I feel like a lot of times that gets discounted now, whereas once upon a time, that was not the case, John.
Yeah, and look at G.I. Joe. I mean, Sergeant Slaughter. We've had some of the greatest characters ever that's taken almost directly off of pop culture, off of either movies or songs or whatever it was. I mean, you had stuff stolen from Elvis. I mean, you've had stuff stolen everywhere. Now, you had a little bit in the other way going back, because you had some people still off Gorgeous George. So you have had wrestling give to culture as well. But I think it's a great feeding ground when you see what people love and you take that out of one genre and you bring it into another. It's something that you pretty much know works. I mean, G.I. Joe worked. You knew that. Sarge was great at it. So you knew pretty much you had a chance. It's not reinventing the wheel.
What a crazy group this was. We're talking about the Dudleys. They had a Native American brother, dances with Dudley. They had Chubby Dudley, who I guess was once upon a time.
Did Gerald Briscoe approve this Native Dudley?
I don't think so. But you'll like this. And boy, this is, not the way we would talk in 2025. But it was said about Dances with Dudley that old Daddy Dudley poked a Hontus. And that's how Dances. I mean, We shouldn't. It shouldn't be funny, but it is. There's Chubby Dudley, there's Sign Guy Dudley, and of course we know there's Ray Dudley, and then Devon Dudley, but Little Spike Dudley. Now that I feel like even now when people talk about the Dudleys, most of us immediately think about Bully Ray and Devon. Shout out to both of those guys. But Spike Dudley, I feel like.
Now, look at that picture, Conrad. I don't mean to cut you off, but that guy's a financial advisor.
Yes, he is.
And he's very good at it, by the way. He's a very smart guy. But it's like we always say, the smart guys play the dumb guys.
It's pretty hilarious too. I mean, in real life, Little Spike Dudley was from Northern California, and his name's Matt Hyson. And as you said, he's an investment banker now, but he's playing this crazy character. And obviously, he's a smaller guy. He's the quote unquote runt of the litter. I love that if you've got a big group of brothers like this. But I think Spike Dudley often gets lost in the shuffle. I mean, that dude he sacrificed his body in a real way for professional wrestling. And he gets a lot of credit for being one of the smoothest in-ring workers of the Dudley clan. I feel like even though Spike wasn't necessarily the biggest guy in the locker room, he probably carried a large amount of respect for the things he was willing to do for the business. Fair to say?
Absolutely. The boys love Spike. He's a good guy, and he took incredible bumps. I saw him, I say recently, I'm bad with time, 3 or 4 months ago, and I said, Spike, how you feeling? And he said, I feel great, which is inexplicable because the stuff he did, he should be in a wheelchair. And apparently he was good for him. I'm very happy for him because I like him very much. I'm glad he is feeling okay. But it was pretty shocking to me that he just walked around holding his coffee like he always did. He's just fine. And he's, one of these guys that, has rubber bones, as we used to say.
Let's talk about Spike a little more as we progress. Bubba Ray had a stuttering gimmick. That's the original idea. He's a comedy act. And
look at that look. I mean, that Bubba is intentionally trying to look like this, the stutter guy. It's just, I love what Bubba did with this.
I do too. And he became a cult act. I mean, people were really into this, but as with a lot of things in wrestling, eventually the fans turn on it, and that becomes an opportunity for him to become a more serious heel. But that wasn't the original plan. And I know that Bubba gets his criticism. I get that. By the way, shout out to Busted Open. You can hear him almost every day of the week there with our pal Dave LaGreca and Tommy Dreamer and Mark Henry and the whole rest of the crew. But the idea that you had a guy who's going to become one of the most well-known and established heels in pro wrestling, that he started as a comedy character and he pulled that off so well. I don't think Bubba maybe gets enough credit for his range as a character, John.
I don't either. I don't. I'd go to bat for that every single day of the week. Bubba is a very smart guy, and Bubba has everything Bubba's done has been fantastic. When he came in, Vince loved the stuttering. I mean, loved it. There was no doubt he wanted Bubba to stutter. Vince just thought it was so freaking entertaining, and we did too. I mean, for a guy to go out there and intentionally stutter, try that. Try that with your family. Just do a skit with your family or your friends. That's really hard to do. And then to go from that, and at one point, I mean, he was this venom spitting heel that was he was really good. He was a really good heel. And then of course, as a tag team, the amount of titles that they've won puts them maybe as the greatest of all time. Now, I think I inducted them into the Cauliflower Alley Club Hall of Fame, which was a tremendous honor for me. And I kind of went over that in the speech. So I've thought about this some. I think the Road Warriors are number one. And I think we always wonder who'd be number two. Kind of like when you look at who's the best commentator of all time, what you're really saying is who's behind Heenan, because there's nobody above Bobby. And I think the team that you could probably put in that Road Warrior category, you've got the Steiners and Harlem Heat and Briscoes and a few that would be in that conversation. The Hardys. Funny how all of them are nearly brothers teams. It's because brothers are just better tag team acts together. But they're one of the few teams that you would even consider putting there with the Road Warriors. And that's quite that's quite an honor.
Hey, so let's talk just a minute here about those titles. You mentioned up all the tag titles that the Dudleys have. And that's one of the reasons I think most people would say, oh yeah, you got to put them near the top of the list. Booker T, great close personal friend of the show.
Yep.
He's buddies with Bully. He's buddies with Devon, but he's recently spoken up and said, Those ECW titles don't count. Those
really?
World titles.
Booker said that.
Booker said they're regional titles. They're not
world
titles. You can't count those. I know
you're fired. Shot fired.
Yes, indeed. Where do you land on that? Obviously, you're a guy who came through Global and you worked some of the more fringe stuff before you landed in the WWF.
Wait a minute, fringe stuff. You're agreeing with Booker now.
Well, no, hang on. I'm saying you traveled the roads and you saw what life was like outside of WWE. I think Booker is hanging his hat on the fact that most of his titles with his brother were in WCW, and that was obviously a national promotion. ECW did have a national promotion for a bit, but when they got national TV, that's actually when the Dudleys were heading to the WWF. Where do you land on that? Does an ECW title run before they had national TV count as a world title? I mean, I know it's silly. What are we even talking about? But I'm asking you to weigh in here. Are you with Bully or are you with Booker?
I guess you'd have to say also, does the ECW singles championship, does that count as a world title? So are they counting that as are they counting that as world titles?
Well, I think that's the question I think Booker is asserting that ECW was a regional promotion. And as much as a hardcore ECW fan as I am, I have to agree with him that technically until they got national TV, they probably were a regional promotion. I do know that they ran some other shows around the country, but they didn't have a national television program. So maybe that's the difference. But if we're really going to say that, I mean, once upon a time, the NWA didn't have any national television. So how do you differentiate? Do you consider the ECW title runs a regional title?
So now is Booker saying that because that means that he puts him and his brother over the Dudleys?
Yes, sir. That's correct.
Outstanding. I love the math.
Yes.
I love how you can go through math and come up with what you want out of it. And Booker may be right. I would lean toward agreeing with Booker that it was more of a regional promotion. Once they become a national promotion, I think that's different. But yeah, I would lean more toward Booker that you had a lot of territories that had a lot of champions, and I don't know how you count all those. I mean, how do you count Ernie Ladd winning a championship somewhere? How do you count all these different guys who held numerous championships many, many times in smaller territories? How do you count that against the national and the global territories, which pretty much have just been WCW and WWE? I understand NWA at one time was certainly a global promotion, and it was. But, Al Perez would argue that he defended the WCCW title down in South Africa, so that makes that a global production. So I could see the arguments and why they are being made.
It is fun when you see two legends like this, and obviously they're pals. I mean, they're working that WWE LFG show together, but I just think it's funny and interesting that they're debating whether or not those are real titles.
Booker is so funny because he'll say stuff like that just to get at you, and he'll just let it ride. He's so good at banter, and so is Bubba. They're both pretty smart guys. I love them taking shots at each other like this.
Hey, you said pretty good at banter. I want to bring up one of my favorite things about the Dudley's presentation, especially when you had a chance to see him live, is Bubba's mic work. I mean, he would come out and just be ruthless with some of the people in the crowd. I mean, there's some famous stuff. Oh, there's a great shot if you're watching with us over on YouTube, where he's actually calling out a fan in the crowd. And man, he's I guess it might have been fair to say back then Bubba was a habitual line stepper. Maybe he took Cheap Heat all the way. What was the old Spinal Tap thing? He took it to 11. I mean, he's pointing out people in the crowd, John. I don't know if you saw this, but he'd say things like, we got a mother here in the front row who taught her daughter how to SD, and we got an ugly skankosaurus who's going to take Devon's 9 inches of blankety blank so far up her blank she won't even know what hit her. I mean, this is...
Wait a minute. Devon had 9 inches?
I mean, you were there. You know what? Let's just create a new one. John, we're live on YouTube. How big's Devon? Never mind.
Apparently, it's damn near a foot, according to Bubba.
Yeah, well, at least it's.
I'm not going to call Bubba a liar. I don't know. They travel together and shower together, so I guess we'd know.
Is there such a thing as taking the cheap heat too far, John? Can you call out people in the crowd too much?
Oh, absolutely. Of course you can. Yeah, but the thing is, like, one of the best things to do in cutting a heel promo is call somebody out specifically in the crowd. Like, look at you, you fat ass. That people get mad about that.
Yeah.
When you start talking about, a whole section like, you people suck. That's one of the dumbest, most superficial things you can say. They're going to yell boo back at you. That's not real heat. That's just that's little puppets. You can yell something at them, they're going to yell back at you. That's pretty unintellectual banter. There's nothing smart about that. But when you start calling people out and calling them out for real things, like, look at you in your little yellow shirt. You look like the number 2 ball on a pool table. And you start talking to people about what they are. Is the number 2 ball? That was a blue ball. One ball was the. I get confused. I got confused the other day when I was talking to Dave Silva about the number 5 ball, and I'm still having some recurring issues about that. So, but when you're calling people out and you're making fun of them specifically in a semi-intelligent way about, look at you, and you start pointing out their shirt, you start pointing out their hat. Now people look at it and go, why are you picking on that person right there? That's bullshit. And you're calling them fat. I mean, the guy has a weight problem. And going, yeah, he has a weight problem. He's fat. He's obese. Now all of a sudden, say, I don't have a problem with that. To me, I think that's a good. Sorry to all you guys out there, you snowflakes out there, but sometimes that can be really good heat. Of course, you can go too far, but it can be really good heat.
I ask about this because this is something that became a staple of the repertoire. He would come out wearing a North Carolina hat that said heels on it. So he's letting you know right up front what he's doing. He would even sometimes wear the rebel flag bandana as another way to get heat. But he would go face to face with guys. And it was really interesting to see because it felt real, where he would pick on a fan. He may grab their beer and throw it at them, and then basically dare them to do anything. Come down to the guardrail, get near them, and say, you want a piece of me and my brother? Come over the guardrail. And Atlas securities all surrounding. I'm sure Ronnie had a blast with this and was like, Bubba, please stop. But that was not the ECW way. And it felt like he was trying to get that riotous heat that we had always heard about that happened in the territory days. And I know they did have a couple of scary moments in ECW, but usually it was with a rival promotion like XPW or something like that. But when you're picking on a fan and basically daring them to come over the guardrail, is that old school? Is it too far? Does it have a place in wrestling? You were a great heel. Where do you stand on that?
I like it. I like it. You tell these fans, so many times you cut promos that are just generic and they're cut for an entire crowd or entire city or something. When you make it personal, I saw that in the old territories. Crawl under the rope, come over the rail. I did the same thing one time with the jumper in San Bernardino. And it was, the thing is, you got to have zero fear. And Bubba has zero fear. You got to know that there's going to be there could be repercussions. That guy could come over. That guy could have a knife. That guy could have something. You don't know, but you got to be willing to take that risk. And I'm not making more of that than I think I should. I mean, that's legitimately there, but you got to be willing to suffer the consequences of what could happen. And that means that guy comes over that rail, there's going to be a fight. And, it could escalate. To do that, you've got to be very confident in yourself. And Bubba had no fear. I mean, zero fear. There aren't many heels that were like that. And Bubba was one of those guys who had no fear. And when those guys are like that, those guys tend to get heat, but they also tend to get the crowd to believing in you because no one else is doing that. No one else is saying, come over the rail and we will fight. Nobody else is saying that. And fans start looking at it going, you know what? Maybe he would whoop my ass. You see hesitancy when you challenge people like that because fans love, especially if they've been drinking a little bit. They love the bravado. I'll come over there and I'll kick your ass. Well, come over. Just come over the rail. And all of a sudden now that they're putting them in a position and fans around them, you can see them start looking at it. They get mad at you, but they don't come over the rail.
Well, let's talk about how sometimes this has consequences, and it's not always with a fan jumping the guardrail. On one specific instance, we had some executives, some pay-per-view executives who were checking out the show, talking specifically about viewers' choice and even TNN. I think they're all a little upset with some of the mic work that Bubba was doing. And there's the level of the swearing and perhaps trying to incite a riot. And maybe there's blood in the match and there's flaming tables in the match. I mean, this is the Dudleys all the way up. And I think perhaps that there was some pushback from some executives. And I guess that really is, the challenge. It's not like, even if someone jumped the guardrail, Atlas Security's there, a couple of minutes later, we can deal with it. But when ECW is trying to grow and some of the executives within the television industry or the pay-per-view industry, they see this and they don't like it, that encapsulates one of the challenges that ECW had to growth. Because if you were in the building, it felt real and you were all about it and you loved it. But if you weren't as hardcore of a fan, it could turn some people off. And those potential investors, they weren't technically investing, capital into ECW in a material way where they're looking for ownership, but they were going to be forward facing and promoting this product either on television or pay-per-view. And if that gives them pause, well, that's bad for the entire brand. So it's kind of a happy medium. Do you remember there being times in your career where you would go out and cut a promo and perhaps bring unnecessary heat on the company? Can you draw an analogy there with what the Dudleys were doing with your own career?
Absolutely, because we're given so much free reign for promos. And I've told you this before. I used the word prick one time. Oh my God. That's the only time Vince has really ever got mad at me about a promo. And he goes, John, we got sponsors here. And I mean, I don't know why that word to him was like, that was too far. That was the Rubicon. You didn't cross that. And whatever reason, I mean, yeah, I've been called on the carpet a couple times. That was the main one because Vince just didn't like that word. He thought it was classless, and that I'd said that in a promo. And obviously, you say, was it approved? No, it wasn't approved. But 90% of my promo wasn't approved either. Vince knew basically what I was going to say, but he gave me the ability to go kind of wherever I wanted. So yeah, there's always a chance you go too far. With Bubba though, in that promo you talk about, the tables and the fire and the blood, that wasn't Bubba. That was brought about by the promotion, whatever it was. That was the match. Right. So I think Bubba gets, the conglomeration of everything together. Oh, he cut this bad promo. There was blood. There was tape. I think Bubba got credit for all of it, and he didn't deserve credit for all of it.
It is interesting to take a look at that time in wrestling because as Bubba and Devon are doing that, I mean, they're on their way to the WWF. They're about to wrap up and go to the World Wrestling Federation. But what's even more interesting is this guy who's doing this, we're talking about Bubba specifically now with these crazy promos, he's technically office for ECW. Like, he's not just one of the boys. I mean, he's helping book some of the buildings and he's one of Paul's sort of soldiers or lieutenants behind the scenes who are really pushing this thing forward, him along with Tommy Dreamer and others. But, he was effective in his job so much that it got Vince's attention. Yeah. Now, I started this program by saying that the Dudleys are one of, if not my all-time favorite tag team. They're up there. They're on my Mount Rushmore of tag teams for sure. But in 1999, I have to admit, I didn't think they were WWE tag teams because we always had this perception of Vince and that Vince liked the body guys. And as much as I love the Dudleys, they both wrestled in tie-dyed t-shirts. So the idea that there was going to be a tag team that wrestles in t-shirts on WWE programming once upon a time felt far-fetched for me. Would you have agreed with that in 99?
Yeah, I would agree. I think Mick Foley paved the way for a lot of these guys. Foley comes in, and I don't know how much Vince was planning on using Cactus, but obviously Cactus, a great worker, a great promo, and did incredible things. Deserved Hall of Famer. I think maybe I'd love to talk to Vince about that and ask him. That changed the perception that Vince had of guys. Shawn Michaels and Bret Hart changed the perception of the Hogan era about what can draw money. You don't just have to have guys like Psycho Sid. You don't just have to have guys like massive tag teams, massive stars. I think Vince realized that there's, it really is a variety show. And I think that's where part of the Dudleys came through. By the way, ECW had two things. One, if the internet had been around back then, those guys would all be millionaires, multi-millionaires by now. They may all be now. I have no idea what their income is, but they would have. They needed the internet. what was hard for them was to get on terrestrial television when you had these dipshits that were part of standard programming, like, oh, you can't do this, you can't do that. Guys who never did anything in their life, all of a sudden in some position in a cable company and overseeing something like ECW. But the second thing is ECW, they were on a finite window before they got in trouble. They were stealing music. They were stealing entrances. I mean, they were just doing whatever they wanted, which is part of the appeal of ECW.
Yes.
But, if ECW would have the internet back then, man, those guys would have been massive, even more massive global stars.
Well said. I agree. It was that renegade spirit that made ECW feel different than and special. And of course, the Dudleys are right at the top of that list of renegades. I do want to ask you, when you think about, the Dudleys in the WWE, at least, I think a lot of people, because of their background in ECW, they drew a comparison to, a tag team that had come through before that maybe had some history with you, the Public Enemy. When you knew the Dudleys were coming in, did the boys in the locker room see any similarities between the Public Enemy and the Dudley Boyz? Because I just can't help but feel like sometimes it's birds of a feather flock together. Like we've heard a lot of people in wrestling say, who would maybe old school or maybe they're critical of the Memphis territory. They might say, oh, that's just that old Memphis bullshit. And they would almost be dismissive of Jerry Lawler and all the great success that he and Jerry Jarrett enjoyed in Memphis. I feel like it was probably easy and maybe a cop-out to do that to former ECW talent too. Hey, we just had another ECW tag team come through here. They're all just blood and guts and yah. What was the perception of the Dudleys before they came into the WWE locker room? And were they being compared before they got there to the Public Enemy?
In fairness, I don't think they were compared. I was obviously there in the middle of all of it. The Public Enemy came in and nobody liked those guys immediately. They would come in late to the shows. They had, I think Terry Taylor was kind of in their ear and I don't think that really helped them. I think he could have, but he's certainly not to blame for them. And then all that happened with Public Enemy when they tried to change the finish on me and Ron. When the Dudleys came in, Ron and I never assumed that they were going to be like Public Enemy. People, I get asked that question a lot. Did you think the Dudleys were going to be like Public Enemy? No, I just thought it was a one-off. I really did. I mean, we met with a lot of the ECW guys. I knew a lot of the ECW guys. Like anywhere, it's just the territory. They're really good guys there. You happen to have two that come in, and I don't know if Public Enemy are good guys or not. I didn't really know them. I just know what happened, and they screwed up. They rubbed everybody the wrong way. They tried to change a finish in a match, and when the Dudleys came in, there wasn't a lot of crossover. Like, oh, this is just another Public Enemy. I think people just looked at it as a blank slate, and I know that kind of sounds crazy. You would think it'd be an association with Public Enemy, but again, we knew so many of the ECW guys. It was just another territory. And so it wasn't like, okay, you had these guys come in who screwed up. The Dudleys are going to be just like that. I don't think people thought that. Me and Ron certainly did not.
When they were there, there was that brief period in 1997 where there was like a little bit of a crossover and you saw some ECW talent on WWE programming. Like in advance of the very first ECW pay-per-view, we would see Sabu jump off of the letters, and there was a tag match with the Dudley Boyz in the old Manhattan Center. And, we saw some crossover. That's even what led to the creation of Mr. Monday Night, Rob Van Dam. Did you get to spend any time with the Dudleys when they were there for that cup of coffee in 97? Or is it really not until 1999 when they become employees with WWE that you get to spend any time at all with them?
Nope, I don't think I met them at all until we shook hands with them before the first run-in they did on us. I don't think we met them at all. And if we did, it was just brief. It wasn't, something where certainly wasn't something where we hung out with them. I was there. It was my match with Savio Vega when you had Sandman and Tommy Dreamer and Paul Lee and those guys, interrupt in Philadelphia that time. So we had done some stuff with ECW, but as far as I know, I don't think we had met the Dudleys at all. It's about me and Ron had met the Dudleys at all.
So when you finally do meet the Dudleys, let's talk about when you guys have an opportunity to, I guess, put them to the test. There's a narrative out there, John, that you and Farouk at the time, Ron Simmons, You guys were kind of the measuring stick. Now, we heard in singles matches.
Damn that Teddy Long for saying that on Taker's podcast.
Well, I'm just saying, once upon a time as a singles wrestler, people would be put in a match with Sean Waltman. And allegedly, he would come through the curtain and say, oh, that guy's got it, or I don't know. Now, you guys apparently were the litmus test for toughness amongst tag teams. That is the narrative that's been out there. So I got to ask, your first match out there with the Dudleys, does Vince get in your ear and say, hey, let's see how this is going to go? Or do you just know this is what's expected of me? And how did they handle it?
We never got a directive. People talked about, before me and Ron were policemen and all that shit. Vince didn't need a policeman. Vince was Vince. Vince was his own policeman. So some guys, we did get asked sometimes to work with guys to see how they worked. And again, not to see how tough they were, to see how they worked. When a DDP came in, it was going to work with Taker and him and Taker and Kane. It was him and I think Canyon, I believe it was. I'm not sure if it was Canyon or Awesome, one of the two. Anyway, they literally asked me and Ron to work with them on the road and let them know how they are and how they're going to be in a WWE system. But that wasn't a matter of toughness. That was just a matter of, hey, go. They trusted us to go out there and get a good feel of these guys and see how they work. We did that a few times. They'd want to know how good guys were. They'd put us with them on the road. We had guys times when we wanted to get guys in shape, and they'd put them with me and Ron. We'd run them to death in the road. There was all kinds of things like that going on. In WWE, you had certain guys, that Vince would trust and would say, hey, work with these guys. Tell me how they are. And not that was the exclusive feedback that he would get. He'd get feedback from everybody, but that was certainly one of the things that came through. I've never asked Bubba if, he thought that, we were like hated ECW or something, because they came in right after Public Enemy. I mean, if anybody, they might have been the ones that thought, they didn't know us. We didn't know them. We figured they were just good guys, but, they had seen what happened with us in Public Enemy. So I don't know what their thoughts were.
Well, we know that when they do land in the WWE, one of the things that Vince likes, and Bruce has talked about it, and you even mentioned it earlier, Vince really liked Bubba's stutter. Now, in ECW, the stutter had been gone for years at this point, but for whatever reason, Vince thought that was hilarious and wanted to try it out. Do you think that stunted or stalled their growth? I mean, at all? Is it a step backwards, I guess, when you have established a character one way, and you jump companies, and then they regress the character, if that makes sense. Like, I don't remember that happening anywhere else before. Now, they made it work, but typically it feels like when a character transitions, if they jump, they're not going back to the old character. Does that make sense?
It does make sense. And I think what it was Vince had seen the character and liked it very much, and they got Bubba out of it. I don't think he didn't stay that long in it, but yes, Vince liked it very much. And again, we were a global company. And ECW, before the internet, they were more of an American company. I guess they had probably had some overseas TV deals, but we were such the bigger company as far as presence that it's kind of a new start for those guys. Even though they had a massive following, and to this day they still chant ECW, around arenas, which is quite incredible. But I didn't think it was that. I didn't think it was that bad of a setback. I thought it was just something Vince really liked. And understand, there's one guy you got to make happy in the company at that time, and that's Vince.
Yeah.
And Vince liked it. And so you go out there and do what Vince likes, and then if he likes it, you can go anywhere you want. And that's what Bubba did later.
It's interesting you said that. It's what one guy likes. I've heard Paul Heyman before say that the WWE for years and years played to an audience of one. Did you feel that way?
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, 100%. It was, and the thing was, now, understand also that I think that was the way to run a business, because you had all these territories and all these other places that you had a committee, you had different people, you didn't know who was in charge. You knew 100% who was in charge. But one thing else we got, Conrad, also, it played to an audience of one, but that audience of one took feedback from everybody. I mean, I've told you how many people would write reports on Monday Night Raw, talking about from Jack Lanza to Chief to so many different guys that would write these. Vince read every single word of every bit of it. Vince would also listen to the crowd. He would also go over the house show reports. With a fine tooth. He read every single word. He wanted to know how the crowd was reacted. Vince said we have a test case every single night right there. And he's talking about the crowd. So it wasn't just Vince saying autocratically, I'm going to run this. I want to be entertained. Vince would run it, but he would also take feedback from everywhere. So I think you get a little bit of misconception of what Vince would do. Vince was doing something that he obviously thought was best, and it came from, having promoted wrestling and sports for about 40 or 50 years, third generation.
I want to ask you about that, John. Do you think that was a net negative for wrestling? Let me explain. I feel like once upon a time in the old school way, the wrestlers, the performers in the ring, they were out there to try to get that reaction from the crowd. That was their North Star. When I hear old guys say, or old timers, I don't mean to be dismissive, say, we're going to call it in the ring. That almost feels like to me, hey, we're going to go out there and we're going to try some stuff and we're going to listen to the crowd and we're going to give them more of what they like and what they're responding to and less of what they're not. So we're going to be fluid and we're not going to. So when we hear criticism now saying like, well, I'm not going to pre-plan everything that happens. And so there's lots of criticism put on the wrestlers by the older generation, the wrestlers of today, who map everything out, move for move and step for step and all that jazz, because they're not able to call it in the ring. In fairness, that I think two things get lost in that. One is back in the day, in the territory days where guys were calling it in the ring, they didn't have to hit TV times. Right. This was a live show for the live crowd, and it didn't make a shit really if your match went in a couple extra minutes longer here or there, whatever. Who cares? But in television, hey, we've got hard breaks. So we've got to have these segments mapped out, and we've got to, take care of our sponsors. So you've got to hit your time. So maybe that does mean we can't improvise as much. But the other thing I wanted to get to is if our previous North Star was we're going to listen to the crowd and we're going to give them more of what works and less of what doesn't. Now we're really not playing to an audience of one. We're playing to the crowd in the building, the 10,000, 20,000, whatever it may be. But if you are on television and you only have a certain amount of minutes and you know exactly what your boss behind the curtain wants you to do, then are you really playing for the 20,000 people there? Or are you playing for the audience of one? And do you think when the wrestler started to do exactly what their boss told them to do, which is what every employee should do, by the way, I'm totally on board with that. Do you lose a little bit of the spirit of pro wrestling? Because we're supposed to call it in the ring and listen to the fans and super serve the audience. But if we're not doing that and we're instead making the man behind the curtain happy, are we losing our way?
I don't think so. And a couple things with the timing on this. It's pretty simple when you have, say, a 3-segment match, and you got to go 6 minutes in the first segment. So you got whatever you got for entrances, but you know where you want to go when you go into break. You don't have to look, and I'll get into about planning the entire match out in just a minute, but you don't have to plan anything out except I need to know, and I would tell the referee, I need to know when I'm a minute out from going to commercial break, because I know at 1 minute I can pace that in my head and I can get to where I need to be at 10 seconds left. So I know I can count down to 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And I know exactly where I'm going to be. And that's without having to know what I'm going to do the first 5 minutes. So all you need is really the break there of the time of where you need to go to break. So you can go out there and call it. I did it a million freaking times. But that being said, look, Steamboat and Savage had a great match. And the whole thing was numbered. Back in the day, that was back then. And also you had Flair and Steamboat had a great match and nothing was called. The only thing that matters to me is the result. I don't give a shit if these guys have the whole thing mapped out. As long as the crowd likes it, who cares? I think it doesn't give you any leeway, but nowadays without live events, you don't have that educational background of, hey, I can go out here and call something. If something goes wrong, I can call something else. You don't have that. Producers are now more important than ever, because guys don't have rep after rep after rep in live events, where now you have a big pay-per-view. We would have 30 matches that would lead up to that pay-per-view. We'd work with that guy or, if you're a girl, work 30 times. You know what you can do. You know what you can't do. It's not fair to compare that to these guys who for the first time get out there with Logan Paul, and this is the first match you've ever had with an incredibly athletic guy who can do everything in the world. It's not a fair comparison, I don't believe, of having to call it all in the ring. I'm sticking up for these modern guys because I think they deserve it. They don't have the ability to have this background educational experience of I'm going to call all this. All I need is 1 minute going to break. I need 3 minutes going home. I need to know when we're coming back from commercial so I can be in a hold or I can be in something else. Guys don't have that. And so things have changed significantly. But I remember we were sitting in a match somewhere, and I can't remember the place. I want to say it's somewhere in Florida. Kane walked out. But that place went freaking ballistic. It was just a live event. That's all it was. Kane walks out, and that place went nuts. I mean, nuts. It was one of the best ovations I'd ever heard. He was just, getting over at the time. And Lanza looked at me, and he goes, "Holy shit." I said, "Oh, my God." And I remember looking at that, and we're sitting there. Me and Lanza were just sitting there watching the crowd. And Kane was so freaking over. It's when he first really got over. The next week on television, Kane's in this huge prime spot. They had changed the show because of what had happened. So you say, is it an audience of one? Yeah. Vince wants to know, did he get over? But when Lanza tells him he did, Vince takes that. So it's not like, Vince famously would say, if you run over, it better be good.
Right.
If it wasn't, Vince might just fire you. So I've get out there a million times where I've changed promos that Vince gave me because I thought it was better. There were times that it worked, and there were times that it didn't. When it worked, I'd come back. Vince would say, "Good job." When it didn't, I go to Vince. Vince, I'm sorry. I thought I had a better idea, and it didn't work. And Vince, okay. Vince just liked you taking responsibility for it. But it was an audience of one, but it really was connected to what was going on out there.
Man, that's fascinating to me because to me, it feels like it is a real challenge because if, you're supposed to be listening to the crowd, but also listening to your boss, it's not easy. So I want to pause our talk about the Dudleys for a minute to take some questions. And we're going to start with a hot one here, John. AOTV Productions wants to know, hey, John, a lot of fans are concerned about WWE going to Saudi Arabia this week. What do you think? Of course, the world has changed since when you and I sat down last week, John.
Yeah.
We've seen some busters go down in Iran, and, well, a lot of people are nervous. Of course, there's just a little body of water that separates Saudi Arabia from Iran, and a lot of people are nervous about their favorite WWE superstars going to that part of the country this week. Of course, we're just a few days away from Night of the Champions, and you've been to these areas before. This is going to be a tough spot to be in for anybody. Do you have any opinions about what should or shouldn't happen this week with Night of Champions and WWE in Saudi Arabia?
Yeah, I do. I think they're going to get a request, recommendations from the State Department. I think they're not going to take any risks that are untoward. I understand people saying you got to cancel this immediately. I don't agree with that at all. You don't cancel a festival in Austria because you have a war in Ukraine. You don't cancel a holiday in Hungary because you have a war in Ukraine. The Strait of Hormuz is between them. Saudi Arabia has no war. And you have Qatar, and you have a barrier of countries there across the Persian Gulf. It's the way the war is going. And, the reason that, and do not digress into logistics of war, but the reason that Israel could bomb Saudi Arabia was because Syria fell. They didn't have the bombers that could go all the way across Syrian airspace into Iran. Well, now that Syria fell, they took the refueling depot in northern Syria. So that's what opened up the ability to bomb Iran, was because Syria fell and Israel worked out a deal where they could refuel their bombers and fly over Syrian airspace is what it was. Made everything work so much better. And it's all northern. Natanz and Fordo is northern near Tehran. That being said, it is a war. You don't know what's going to happen. There's nuclear weapons, but you hadn't had a nuclear weapon go off in decades, and the only people that ever used one was back in the 40s against somebody else. Doesn't mean it might not happen again. I think it's perfectly safe for those guys. I've talked to some guys by text that are going. They don't seem to have any concerns. Apparently, the WWE has told them whatever they know. I think WWE is going to make the decision that's best and safest. They're not going to risk their guys, their girls. They're not going to risk anything. Saudi Arabia is going to be there. It's a complete different country. They're at odds with Iran because of the Sunni and Shia divide. But there's no, at least right now, threat of war between the two. Saudi Arabia appears to be incredibly safe. So I don't think it's an issue. And if it is, I think they'll cancel. And if it's not, I think they're going to go, and I think the people are going to be very safe.
That's something I don't think a lot of people in the wrestling community think about. A decision like this is not going to be made completely by WWE. I mean, I know that.
Right.
I mean, this is something that they are going to have conversations.
Yeah, Nick Khan's not making this decision.
Yes,
he may end up saying, based upon what the State Department says.
Yes.
What it is, but it's not going to be just Nick Khan going, you know what, I feel good about this, I think we should go, or I feel bad about this, we shouldn't go. You're going to get all kinds of feedback from the government of the United States, who has and the government of Israel, of Mossad, of the government's intelligence services. You're going to have incredible people. Don't want anything to happen to civilians flying over there of all different kind of citizens, not just the United States, but the whole roster that WWE has. Nobody wants anything to happen. They're going to make sure they're safe. And again, it'll be in conjunction with the State Department and the best intelligence that's out there.
Keep those questions coming for John Layfield. Let's talk about Royal Rumble 2000. This is going to be a breakout performance for the Dudleys. We know that they're going to jump ship in late 99, but by early 2000, man, they're showing what they can do on pay-per-view against the Hardy Boys. It's a double tables match. The Hardy Boys are not yet the Hardy Boys that we know and love. They're still making a name for themselves here in the WWE, and so are the Dudleys. And these guys came out and stole the show. What a tremendously underrated pay-per-view this is. Royal Rumble 2000, if you're looking for a badass pay-per-view from 25 years ago, I recommend that one. You're going to see an incredible street fight with Triple H and Cactus Jack. But, man, we get started with a hot one. The Dudleys and the Hardys. It gets 3.25 stars, but when you see these guys jumping off of shit through tables in Madison Square Garden, this is a whole new WWF. The tag division, respectfully, was not looking like this just 5 years prior. I mean, if you go look at tag team wrestling in the WWF in 95, and then you take a look at this presentation on pay-per-view with all these tables and the acrobatics of the Dudley Boys, we've turned the volume up in a big way here. Who do you think deserves some of the credit for the resurgence of tag team wrestling here in the early 2000s? We're about to get Edge and Christian. We're going to get the Dudley Boys. We're going to get the Hardys. It does feel like it became more of a priority. Was this someone behind the scenes who really liked tag team wrestling? We've heard for years that Vince was not necessarily a fan.
Yeah, and I don't know what it was that started. You brought in Public Enemy, that didn't work. Then you brought in the Dudleys, it did work. Then you brought in the Hardys, who were a smaller team, and you had monster teams back there. Hardys are not small guys, by the way.
No,
they're normal to big size, or normal to over bigger than average guys. They're just compared to the roster of that era was, they're small guys. And then you brought in Edge and Christian, and it worked. I think it's just a matter of you brought in the right teams, and it worked. It's kind of like Lita and Trish when you had them headline Monday Night Raw. If that match doesn't work, you're still going to have the women's movement, but it's probably pushed back 10 years. But because it worked, you had the right people. You had two great talents with Trish and Lita. Because it worked, all of a sudden the women's movement explodes. As it should have done 30 years earlier, but it didn't. It didn't in UFC either. But I think the tag team was the same thing. You just happened to have the right guys. They were given the opportunity, but if they had shit the bed, you might have seen tag teams 10 years later, but it wouldn't have come right away. But instead, you had great Hall of Fame talents in all of those guys. And I'm talking about the three major tag teams that could do that, and Edge and Christian, the Hardys, and the Dudleys. And by the way, when the Dudleys came in, the first match they had, Bubba had a baseball bat. And Ron asked me, he goes, "You do know how to use a baseball bat, right?" You can't work a baseball bat. And Bubba goes, "Yes, sir." And he gave it I think he gave it the Devon, or he hit me with it or something. Anyway. But Conrad, when I say they beat the shit out of us, we were out there. They knew what they had to do. They knew this was kind of their test. And we said, guys, just lay it in, make it look good. We're not going to bitch. We're going to be fine with it. We'll get you back next week. It's not a big deal. Boy, Conrad, they beat the shit out of us. That Bubba hit me so hard with that bat. I mean, they beat us so bad. And then the next week, I think it was the next week, not the next night, we had to rush them in an interview. And pretty much all the boys were lined up to watch the receipt. And, we got them pretty good. No worse than they got us. We, same amount of, we got them just like they got us. They got up, Conrad, shook our hands, said, "Thanks, guys," hugged us. We went out and had beers, and we've been best friends ever since.
Aaron Sheen is with us here live, and he says, did it take a while for the Dudleys to earn everyone's respect coming in after the Public Enemy debacle? Sounds like that was pretty early on in your experience with them.
It was very early on. They came in, and they knew they had to lay us out. They knew they had to beat us up. They didn't want it to look fake. They didn't want to look anything. They might not needed to go that far because Conrad, I'm telling you, they beat the shit out of me and Ron. And, me and Ron, neither one of us said anything. We knew we were going to get them back, and we did. And they got up right away, shook our hands, said, "Thanks, guys," hugged us, and we went out and had beers that night, and we've been best friends ever since. Dudley's got over right away. They're just good guys. They're tough guys, and they are very tough guys, by the way.
Yes.
Very tough guys. You can't do what they've done for so many years and not be tough guys. But they got over with the boys right away. Everybody loved them.
That answers Jack Gaffney's question. He says, rumor and innuendo says the Dudleys came in a little stiff with chairs and snug tags, the whole deal. Did you or Ron ever have to pull them aside and say, "Hey, boys, this ain't ECW"? That wasn't the way you guys talked, but you handled your business, and it feels like there was some mutual respect fairly quickly with you guys.
Oh, what are we going to do? You think me and Ron are going to bitch?
Yeah.
Absolutely. We told them to lay it in. And they did. They beat the shit. I mean, Connor, they beat the shit out of us. We did the same thing to them. And as soon as we're done, they got up and shook our hands. Everybody saw that.
Yeah.
And you realize, these are just good guys. They're going to work very stiff, or as hard as stiff as you want them to. And so are we. They're not going to bitch. They're not going to complain. They're here to draw money. They're here to make a living like the rest of us are. So no, it wasn't a matter of this ain't ECW. This is, in fact, we're telling them, guys, do what you do in ECW. That was what we told them. Do exactly what you do. You're not going to break us. You're not going to hurt us. You will be fine. And we'll give it back to you, and you'll be fine too.
Well, clearly the Dudleys impressed someone with this Royal Rumble 2000 match. I highly recommend you go check it out.
It was unbelievable, Conrad. I'm going to cut you off, but God almighty, man, because I digressed a little bit about that first match with the Dudleys. But what a freaking match in the Garden.
Yes.
I mean, that was unbelievable. We hadn't seen shit like that.
Right.
The world hadn't seen shit like that. The boys certainly hadn't seen nothing like that. I remember the first table that went through was Sean. It was like a power bomb from Kevin. And that was a big deal. These guys took that to a level that is insane from that point. They were doing crazy, crazy stuff. And by the way, I just saw a guy that was an OSHA guy, a safety guy, down in AAA, works with TKO, which is awesome. The first time I'd ever seen an OSHA guy there. We always had we had a stunt coordinator, but we had one later. We didn't have one in the beginning. We didn't have any of that back then.
Wait. Hang on. You're not saying you met like a guy who works for OSHA as a fan. There was a guy on behalf of OSHA at a AAA event?
Yeah. Yeah.
I didn't know that was a thing.
I didn't either. First time I ever met one.
So do you think that's a TKO mandate?
It appears to me. The first time I ever met one. I didn't ask him if he's at all of them. He was just down there for he was with OSHA. And I thought it was cool. I thought it was great.
Oh, OSHA in Mexico.
Yeah, in Mexico. Because I told him, I said, "Good luck down here, buddy." He was a super nice guy, and he didn't, he wasn't one of, we had commission guys that were just assholes. He wasn't one of those guys. He's worth he just want people to be safe. I think that's wonderful.
I hate we're sidebarring the show here, but you're melting my mind right now. What would they have to run past the OSHA guy? Are they like saying, "Hey, we're going to do table spots"?
I guess you would have we got a iguana that might bite somebody that's actually stuffed. Yeah, I don't know. No, I don't know, because I didn't see him doing that much out. I didn't see what he did with, because the biggest match down there with the craziest stuff was Del Rio with the cage match. But I didn't see the guy out there doing a lot of stuff. Maybe he talked to Del Rio in the back, Patron now he goes by. But I didn't see, he was busy the whole night, but I was too. So I didn't see what all that he did.
Man, that's so wild to think that there might be OSHA in wrestling now in TKO. But let's.
But wait a minute, Connor. I think it's wonderful.
Oh, I'm not complaining. I'm just saying.
Great.
Yeah.
I mean, God bless them. We did shit back then that there wasn't OSHA. Nothing. Back then you're going, I think I can hit you with this and not kill you. That was pretty much what you thought. I think this table will hold me. Maybe. You had no idea.
I cannot wait to hear more about this in the future. I do want to talk
I didn't
about.
realize I just spilled the beans, but
Oh yeah, that's big news.
I think it's to me, I think it's a good thing, not a bad
Oh
thing.
yeah, no, listen, I'm all
We had assholes from the commissions, and the one in Baltimore was those guys were such dicks. They're replaced now, but I've met the new guys, good guys, not like the old guys. But we used to go around the country, and they were just idiots. I mean, just idiots. They wanted to get paid. They wanted to steal some money from you. That's what they're doing, stealing money from you. They're supposed to be there for your safety. They're supposed to be there for low-income kids, especially like in boxing and MMA events, to make sure that if they get hurt, they're able to take to the hospital and things are being done. They didn't do none of that. All they did was come to the shows that made money and steal money. So we had guys that were supposed to be doing this. They didn't do their job because they were criminals, is what they were. These old commissions is what they were. But this guy is part of the company. I think it's fantastic. I mean, when we would do stuff like we're going to fall off the ladder, we're going to do this, we're going to go through the ring. We were doing this for the first time. I mean, I remember when they had me go through the ring against Big Show in the barbed wire steel cage match. They had a trap door that was Hornswoggle couldn't have gone through. It killed me. And Vince was like, "Why wouldn't you make it twice as big?" And Ellis goes, "Okay." And so he did. And he did. It was perfectly safe. But we didn't have any type of standards back then because we didn't know what we were doing. And now it's so great to have a guy like this.
No doubt. Can't wait to see how wrestling continues to evolve. I never imagined that word would appear in wrestling, but here we are. And thankfully, there were no OSHA representatives on site when they created TLC, because in the shadows of this Royal Rumble match with the Hardys, where the Hardys won, by the way, the Dudleys are going to win the tag titles just a month later, but that leads to the first Dudleys, Hardys, Edge, and Christian three-way ladder match at WrestleMania. Now, this is not officially a TLC match, but you can certainly see where it all starts to take shape. And I do feel like for the rest of their careers, the Dudleys are going to be forever linked with the Hardys, Edge, and Christian. I've got some wrestling friends in my life who, they were lapsed fans for a while, but whenever they break out the good old days, they often point to these crazy spectacles that these three teams created together. What was it about those three teams that clicked so well together, John?
I think it was a combination of factors. I think it was two things. I think one, they were all very smart guys, and they are all six of those guys, very smart guys, as far as how to get over, what they wanted to do. They're all very creative guys that goes with that intelligence. And also they were very, very hungry. And I think when you put those things together and the fact that they got carte blanche to do what they wanted, which is pretty cool. You had six young guys that were all incredibly creative, all very smart, and all had this incredible hunger to get over. And they're given carte blanche. That makes itself into something really cool is about to happen. And I think that's why this whole thing happened with those guys. I remember one day we're sitting out there, we're watching Edge and Christian do something, and they're like planning something like on top of this some freaking ladder or something. And somebody asked Ron, he goes, "Ron, what would you do if they called that with you?" He said, "Tag, John."
I love that so much.
Thank God we weren't into those freaking things. We couldn't have done it, but thank God we weren't. We could have hit people with the ladders, but we couldn't have done much else.
We did get questions like that. Like, let me see if I can find it here, because I saw it a little earlier where people are wondering, oh, here it is. The Raw show, the Row show. Question for the show. Why wasn't the APA ever involved in any of the infamous TLC matches with the Dudleys? That is interesting to think about how those matches could have looked a little differently if you and Ron were involved.
Well, yeah, what are we gonna do? Catch them? That's all we did. All we did was catch them. I remember one time the Hardys had like some spikes on their belts or something, and like cool shit, that you'd wear. And me and Ron come back, and we look like we've been in a fight with a bobcat. Our faces all because we're having to catch them, do all this stuff. That they didn't know their belts were scratching us all up and killing us. Thank God we weren't involved in those TLC matches. What the hell we were gonna do?
It's hilarious to think about you guys being involved in a TLC. We know that, after the success of the WrestleMania match, the three-way ladder match, they're going to do a big match at SummerSlam. That might actually be the very first TLC. Tables, ladders, and chairs. We're going to see a series of matches here, and it does feel like the stakes continue to be raised. And I've seen in the shadows of what happened with Mick Foley and The Undertaker in Pittsburgh and the Hell in a Cell in June of 98. Years later, there would be criticism thrown Mick Foley's way saying, hey, did he take it too far? Did he inspire a generation of backyard wrestlers or aspiring wrestlers who wanted to get into the business to just throw caution to the wind and sacrifice their body and maybe perhaps shorten their career? Now, I'm a huge Cactus Jack fan, but I have seen those sort of criticisms lobbied his way. And I know that we're certainly turning the volume up here. And there's been a lot of guys who were from the old school who would say things like, man, you're going to be in a wheelchair by the time you're 30 if you keep this up, and that sort of talk. Did you think at the time that they were perhaps taking it too far? I mean, I know we're joking about the APA wanting no part of these TLC matches, but were you concerned about wrestler safety? I'm not talking about funny tongue-in-cheek OSHA nowadays. I mean, like, were we setting a bad precedent where, hey, eventually we can only do so much? People had that criticism of ECW all the time. I remember as an ECW fan, people saying, what's next? Is Tommy Dreamer going to bring a gun down to the ring or something? No, nothing like that ever happened. That's silly. Although we did see guns on Monday Night Raw with Vince and Austin, but I digress. But I am curious, were you concerned at all about wrestler safety? Like, hey, are we pushing it too far here?
No. They said the same thing about Gus Sonnenberg in the late 20s. They said the same thing about Harley Race.
Yeah.
They said the same thing about Harley Race. He was a flip and flop guy. Harley Race. They said that about. Screw these guys. I get so tired of these, these guys that are trying to overanalyze shit. And some of these guys out there, there are a lot of guys out there that can't work, that just fall off shit, and they think they can get over. Foley could work. Foley was a great promo. Foley's as the history will tell you what a smart guy Mick is. And Foley would do things that made sense in the match. He didn't just go out there and fall off a cage. He went out there and fall off a cage at a certain time. Shawn Michaels and Razor, first ladder match. They did stuff that mattered. The Dudleys, the Hardys, and Edge and Christian, they did stuff that mattered. These guys today that are doing stuff just to try to get over because they say, okay, if I fall off a ladder, if I go through a table, I'll get booked somewhere. No, you won't, because you can't work. All you're doing is risking your life and risking the life of your opponent. That's all you're doing, because you're an idiot. And so I don't have any sympathy for these guys that go out there that can't work and see this and go, okay, that's how I get over. No. The Hardys, Edge and Christian, and the Dudleys got over before they did this. This got them over to a new level, but they had already proven what great talent they were. They could work. This was the culmination of something. This wasn't the be-all, end-all. I see some matches now, and the whole match is predicated on, okay, I'm going to put my feet here, and I'm going to grab the guy, and everybody's like, ooh, what's he going to do? What's he going to do? What's he going to do? That's not how they did things. That made sense in a dramatic fashion. Foley didn't get up there and Undertaker pushed their feet around and go, oh, my God, is he going off the cage? Going off the cage? All of a sudden, he goes off the cage as part of the match, as part of this drama between Undertaker and Mankind. A huge difference. And so for guys today that say, oh, these guys opened up Pandora's box. No, they didn't. These guys today that can't work, and I'm not talking about 100%. I'm talking about the ones that go out there and just do shit because they can't work. And there's a ton of those. They do that because they're trying to mask something, and that's their inability to get over any other way. So no, I don't have sympathy for these guys that look at this and say, oh my goodness, they're the ones that caused all this to happen. No, they didn't. They created an entire new genre, and they created this entire new spectacular idea of tables, ladders, and chairs they done. And by the way, all those guys, none of them got hurt doing it.
Hey, speaking of not getting hurt doing it, we should mention that somewhere in here, Bubba's going to start a trend where he starts power bombing, everybody through tables. So when I say everybody, I mean everybody. Terry Runnels, Trish Stratus, Mae Young. I mean, these are crazy spectacles. And if you take a look at almost every one of those, boy, Bubba took great care of every one of these folks. I mean, there is a reason that these guys are professionals. There is a right way to do it and take care of your opponent. And it does feel like as crazy and over the top and sensational as some of these visuals were, I don't remember hearing any injury reports. I think old Bubba knew what he was doing. Fair to say?
100%. Bubba took such good care. I mean, look at the way they landed. They landed on top of Bubba.
Yeah.
You pull them in, you hold on to them, you make sure, because your job is when you've got somebody's literally their health in your hands, your job is to make sure they walk away from that unscathed. That's your job. That's the number one thing that you're supposed to do. Now, you need to make it look good. You need to do all that stuff, but you got to make sure when somebody trusts you with their health, that they walk away unscathed. And Bubba did that. You look at the way he's holding on to them. He carries them. He lets them land on him. They're not going through the tape. Bubba did a really good job of taking care of these guys. That's why, I see guys, step out of the way when somebody jumps off a top rope and they go splat on the floor. Look, I'm sorry. Don't agree to it if you're not going to take care of their health. And if you do agree to it, you got to protect them. And Bubba did this.
It is interesting to think about, the Dudleys here, because they're going to come in at a time when the WWF is on fire. ECW's got national TV, but they're going to be on their way down. WCW, we know, is going to be down and out. And by 2001, they're all gone. And it's a one-horse race, and the Dudleys are firmly established here in WWE. But one of the other pivots that we would see along the way with their presentation is they move away from the tie-dye and they move into the camouflage. I know that tie-dye and ECW was synonymous with them, but it did feel like the Dudleys sort of made camouflage their thing in the WWE. And it had been a while since we had, Corporal Kirshner or Sergeant Slaughter or any of those sort of camouflage, even the Bushwhackers. Did you have a preference between the tie-dye or the camo? Did you think the camo was cool?
I thought the camo was cool, and I thought it was a little more hard edge.
Yeah,
and I thought that was appropriate. I love the tie-dye stuff, but it's hard. Coming out of that era, it was becoming a different era, and tie-dye was going out. It wasn't just for the wrestling; it was for everywhere. Tie-dye was no longer being cool out in public, and so I thought it made sense that progression to go to the camo, which allowed them to get more serious.
We're going to see Spike join the group here as we're watching on YouTube at somethingtowrestle.com. And how do you think he added to the presentation? I mean, you were there and you understand wrestling better than most. Now you've got, two big guys, and now you've got a smaller guy who can be added to the group. If this were the Freebirds, and I know they're not, but if they were, I guess Spike might be like your Buddy Roberts. I mean, he's your guy that you can bump around a little bit. Can you explain that?
Boy, was Buddy Roberts a heat-getting son of a bitch.
Yes.
Oh, my God. Buddy Roberts was so freaking good. So was Jimmy Garvin, but Buddy Roberts, my God, man, that guy got heat. He could get heat walking into an igloo. It was unbelievable how good Buddy was. And it's great to have a guy like this. It's great to have a guy that people just hate. People want to see Buddy Roberts die. They love Michael moonwalking. They love Bam Bam doing all of it. He was a great worker. The Dudleys, these two guys who are doing all this TLC stuff and all this, you need a little heater like Spike Dudley, and he was great at it. You want to see him get killed, and he got killed every single week. Who was the guy that always got killed in one of the cartoons? Anyway, that was Spike. Spike got killed. Spike got killed every week. That choke slam he took from Taker to the floor.
Oh, God.
To this day, I don't know how he's walking. I mean, Spike just had rubber bones.
It's got to be one of the stiffest bumps. I mean, we saw
shit
shots.
Conrad, that's what, 12 feet straight down?
Yes.
I mean, just straight down. I mean, try getting on. They say, well, there are mats there. Okay, do this. Go find you a mat like that and just fall backward on it and see what happens to you.
Stretch the mat over concrete.
Right.
Fall backwards on it. Yeah.
Right.
Hey, the invasion angle is going to be next. And, of course, the Dudleys are going to be involved as a part of the ECW piece of business. But that's, once again, another cool opportunity because you're going to see them represent the ECW brand with Paul Heyman and their band of brothers. But to see how these tag matches shake out, I mean, the Dudleys are going to be in some really high-profile opportunities. But as part of this whole invasion angle, they also get the right to say that they were WCW Tag Team Champions. And if I were going to throw a flag on any of the title runs, I might not throw it on the ECW tag title reigns, even though I understand they didn't have national TV. But if you win a WCW title after WCW's already closed, I don't know if that counts if you won it in WWE. What say you, John?
So you win an ECW title or a WCW title?
I'm saying, like, you remember when Chris Jericho unified and he had the big gold from WCW and he had the big eagle from the WWE? Well, they count that as a WCW champion. So technically, Rock was WCW champion and the Dudleys were WCW champions. I don't know about that. But I count the ECW reigns. I don't know that I can count the WCW tag title reigns for the Dudleys. What say you?
Oh, I completely agree. You got to throw out the WCW reigns. No, hell no. They went bankrupt. No, they didn't officially go bankrupt. They got bought out for pennies on the dollar. So they didn't actually go bankrupt. But they pretty much went out of business. So I don't think you can count that. Just because like your company goes out of business and you walk into like Jim Herd's old office and you find these tag titles there and go, hey, look, I got the tag titles. That doesn't necessarily mean you're the tag team champion.
I do want to ask you about something that I never thought we would see. I did think the Dudleys would be together forever. I don't know why, but sometimes you kind of see a split coming. I think all of us once upon a time could see famous tag teams maybe going their own way. Guys like Edge and Christian come to mind. Like, you could see those as individual acts. And when it came to the Dudleys, you know, they always had the matching gear. And I don't know, it just felt like this is going to be a tag team forever. Now we find out that's not necessarily the case. The very first brand extension draft, we split up the Dudleys. And that means Taz is going to have a feud with Spike. That's going to be not necessarily long for this world. But when we see the actual Dudley Boys, I'm talking about the tag team of Devon and Bubba split, where Bubba's on Raw and Devon's on SmackDown. I wasn't sure how I felt about that because I was such a fan of the tag team. I was excited to see them individually, and it certainly felt like they were lining Bubba up for a singles push on Monday Night Raw. And in theory, that made a lot of sense. But in practice, I don't know that it necessarily went exactly how people expected. Why didn't the Bubba singles run on Raw work here in the early 2000s?
I don't know. And the reason, because it worked everywhere else, it worked in TNA.
Yeah,
it worked everywhere he's been. I don't know if it's a lack of good creative for him. You know, you hate to just, people love bashing creative, but I don't know. And maybe it was too soon. You know, people still love the Dudleys. And maybe they wanted Bubba and Devon to be together. You know, Devon did a great job with Reverend Devon. He crooked ass forever. Look at him. How crooked is that guy? How crooked is that? Is the greatest thing ever. Me and Ron loved Reverend Devon, especially when he passed the collection plate.
Yes.
And Ron would find a way to get the money.
But did you think, I mean, respectfully, I loved it too. I thought it was funny as a character and a piece of the show. But doesn't the Reverend Devon gimmick, by its very nature, give you a glass ceiling? Like, that 100%. Guy can only move up so far on the card, right?
100%. You got to get out of that to go somewhere else. You know, that's a good, place to go to just for a short time, just to travel through. You know, if you want to get Devon to something else, you give him the Reverend Devon first, then get him out of that and go to something else. So yeah, 100%. There's the Reverend Devon definitely has a glass ceiling to it that there's only so high you can go with that, because it's very entertaining character. But that's not a character that's going to carry the world championship. Devon could have.
Oh, yeah.
Devon could have, but not that character.
What's interesting to me, too, is when you think about the split, Bubba kind of keeps the Dudley presentation. Devon goes to the Reverend thing. And we know the Reverend thing is going to be short-lived. It doesn't work out for whatever reason. But I almost wonder, hey, what if it would have happened the opposite way? What if we switch up Bubba's presentation and we just let Devon be Devon Dudley? Could that have worked?
Yes, it could have worked. Absolutely, it could have worked. We'll never know. But yes, Devon had the talent to be whatever there was on the roster. He was as good as anybody there was. So yes, it could have worked. He just got hamstrung by a gimmick that Vince loved, by the way. Vince loved that Reverend Devon. All the guys did. We had fun with it. It was something we didn't want him to get out of it because we loved what he was doing. We all were very entertained by Reverend Devon. So it was one of those things where you're really entertaining the guys a bunch, and so we didn't want him out of it. But yes, it could have worked if you'd had Devon stay with the Dudley type character and Bubba go off and do something that was a bit of a divergence from the Dudleys. I think Devon would have had a lot of success.
It is interesting to think, because I wonder, do you think fans really just wanted to see the Dudleys? Is that the reason the singles runs doesn't really work? And if that really is the reason, would it have made sense for both guys to just completely switch characters, just drop the Dudley stuff completely and try something else? Either way, we know that they want to be back together. They are going to reunite. And I see some questions here live. Are we live? Yes, no name, we're live. And I will read your comment if you ask a good question. I don't really know what you want me to do there. I see you have commentary on the show, and thank you for being here live, but I have to ask John a question, no name. So if you've got a question, drop them live. We are indeed live. It is June 23rd at 9:47 Central, 10:47 Eastern in the morning. And thank you for being with us. The Dudleys are going to reunite, and they're going to align themselves with Paul Heyman, and he's going to build them the Dudley. He's going to be constantly promoting singles matches, and the idea is you're not going to know which Dudley to expect. I guess this is the old Freebird rule, but as singles. We do some silly stuff. Of course, we've talked about Great American Bash 2004 here on the program, where Undertaker tries to kill Paul Bearer with the concrete. Is that one of the worst, most hilariously bad moments in WWE history, do you think, John?
That guy was a goof.
Yeah.
The guy, the stunt guy. So I was there, that day. You guys were working with Eddie, in the bull rope match, and the guy said he could hold his breath for like 4 minutes. He's like, literally, he goes, no worries. He was like this arrogant, cocky dude. Like, I can hold my breath for 4 minutes. He gets out there, he can hold it for like 4 seconds before they're having to bail him out of this thing. That was the absolute worst. It was so freaking bad. And by the way, the scar I've got right here on my head, right there, that's from Undertaker and telling a story when I was getting sewed up. So the doc was sewing me up because I don't know if I juiced or if Eddie had busted me open with a cowbell. I think he busted me open with a cowbell. I'm not sure. And I'm getting stitches backstage, and everybody's just laughing about this guy that said he could hold his breath for 4 minutes, and he held it for like 4 seconds and thought he was dying. And so Undertaker's backstage telling a story, and Doc's sewing me up. Well, I'm getting like all sewed up and stuff. I'm like sitting here listening. Everybody in the room is looking at the Undertaker. Everybody, even the doctor. The doctor's sitting there just listening to him. And he's telling this great story, and I'm like, dude, I'm getting my head sewn up. Would somebody please pay attention to me while you're sewing me up? And so when they get done, the doc goes, okay, you're fine. He never even looks at me. He's a great doc. He's a good friend. But Undertaker had told this story, and everybody wants to hear it. When I get done, Larry Heck looks at me and goes, this is the worst sew job I've ever seen. You can see the loop in there. It wasn't even tight. So Undertaker's the reason I've got this scar. So that match that he had with Paul Bearer, I hate it because of my scar.
I love it for that. Hey, I want to ask you about when they leave the company. Of course, One Night Stand is going to reunite the Dudleys, and we get a big time, really fun match. I was there, still one of my greatest wrestling memories of my life. That original One Night Stand was something else. I know you had a lot of fun there, and we both left having a good time that night. But I want to ask you about what's next for the Dudleys, because it feels like the days with WWE are numbered. And when they leave the WWE and their contracts are not renewed or whatever happens, they find out they can't use their name. And I want to do a deep dive on that, because I guess the Dudleys were told when they left ECW by Paul Heyman something along the lines of, hey, yeah, of course you can keep using your name. And they were allowed to use that name in the WWE. But of course, Paul said that when WWE didn't own ECW and their IP. Of course, we know that WWE purchases ECW's assets out of bankruptcy, and that all happens a couple of years after the Dudleys leave ECW. But now when Bully and Devon are going to leave the WWE, they find out that, oh yeah, you can't call yourself Dudley anymore. You have to call yourself something else. WWE owns that IP. So they're going to register trademarks for the Deadly Brothers, Deadly, Team 3D, Brother Ray Deadly, and Brother Devon Deadly. It feels like fans are kind of poking fun at Deadly Brothers, and they just start calling themselves Team 3D. In hindsight, is anyone to blame for any of this, or was that just the way business was done back then? It was just a handshake deal, and hey, Paul said, so here we go. How could this have been handled differently, John?
A couple things. The First, WWE could have handled it differently. It's a different world now in WWE, and they are so good to guys, as far as keeping names and things like that. Very good. They weren't back then, and it was, you understand where Vince came from. Vince came from a zero-sum game where, you had Vern and Eddie Graham and Fritz and all these guys that were trying to run him out of business, and they wanted to run him completely out of business. Vince still had this, I believe, in his mind. So that was a lot of reasons for this battle and this barrier that was up. Hey, I'm not going to let you keep your name. I own that. I'm not going to build a name for you and then let you go somewhere else. The world had changed. There really wasn't competition anymore. But Vince, I believe, still had that mindset that, look, I don't care if there is competition or not. We didn't think WCW was competition in 92. And all of a sudden they kicked our ass and almost put us out of business for 83 straight weeks. So you never know what might happen. And I think that comes from a lot of it from Vince. It's just, Vince checks all the boxes, man. He doesn't make many mistakes. And because of that, I think that's the reason you didn't get to use names like that. I think, now WWE it's much different. The world has changed. But, are the Dudleys to blame for this? Probably. But I'd have done the same thing. I'd have done the exact same thing that Bubba and Devon did. You say, okay, you can keep the name. All right, cool. Shake the hand, walk out. All of a sudden it sells. Now the company sells and you got lawyers that are saying, you can't use that name. We're going to sue you. And you're like, oh, you got to be kidding me. To get my name, I got to hire a lawyer. I got to fight these guys. They've got all the money in the world. It's just not worth it.
We know that they're going to enjoy a lot of success in TNA. They're going to have a lot of success as a tag team there. And then, of course, Bully has his incredible singles run. He's actually going to wind up in a relationship with Brooke Hogan. Yes, Hulk Hogan's daughter. And we find out this was all manipulation for the Aces and Eights gang to run roughshod over their promotion. Bully got himself in great shape, totally changed his character here, became Calfzilla, and showed that he could really double down on the entertainment of the sports entertainment side of things. Did you get a chance to see much of Bully's TNA stuff, and what did you think?
I thought it was fantastic. I'm a big Bubba Dudley fan, and I loved everything Bubba did. I think he's a smart guy. I love the stuff he does on Busted Open Radio, and I love the stuff he does everywhere. Yes, I saw a lot of it. I thought it was very, very entertaining. And it wasn't surprised at all. Me and Ron saw these guys when they came in. We talked to them about matches and stuff. You can tell when a guy knows what he's doing and when he doesn't. And you can tell a guy when he knows what he's doing when he's, in any group of wrestlers, when you sit around, you go over a match that has like 6 or 7 people involved, there's always 1 or 2 guys that'll speak, and people give them that floor because of the respect they have, of the intelligence that they have. Bubba's one of those guys. And so, no, I didn't find it surprising. I was very happy for him, but I certainly didn't find it surprising that he had huge success.
Hey, let's talk just a minute here about the real life Bully and the real life Devon. You and I are both in agreement that we really like Bully Ray. And I love his approach to wrestling. I love the way his mind works for wrestling. I love hearing him talk about wrestling. And I just like him in real life. Obviously, Devon is the salt of the earth. Nobody's ever had a bad word. I challenge anyone listening to this. Find someone who ever in the history of ever didn't love Devon.
Devon by himself is actually like populating the entire earth. He has right now apparently 438 children.
I love you for that.
And they're all good kids, by the way. I've met like 436 of them. I hadn't met 2 of them. I hadn't met, but I'm not sure which 2.
I want to ask you, why do you think Bully has such a different reception than Devon? In certain circles, it feels like Bully has heat, and people have decided they just, I don't mean like in the fans don't like him. I mean, I hear people who say, I can't stand it. And not like, I don't think they're saying it in terms of he's a good heel. They just feel rubbed wrong by him. Is that just because he's a Northeast guy? I get along great with him. I like him. I don't understand where the heat comes from. What do you think?
Because Bully has a case of fucktosis. He doesn't give a fuck.
Okay.
That's what it is. And I love him for that. He will say anything that if he thinks it's the right thing to say creatively, he'll say it. He doesn't care. Too many guys want to appease everybody, want to be everybody's friends. Bubba's out there to be entertaining and to make money. I got a lot of respect for that. And a lot of people conflate that with what he said in the ring with him. Bubba's not like that. No, just like I hope I'm not like JBL. But Bubba doesn't have a problem with going out there and doing whatever he needs for entertainment. And because of that, he roasts people the wrong way. And he doesn't care. I got a lot of respect for that too. Devin, on the other hand, is just the nicest guy in the world. I love Devin. He used to always say when he come on the top rope, every time he go up there, I go, "Oh, the humanity." The Hindenburg crashing. Because I said Devin has the glide path of a sofa. He just kind of fell off the top rope. I don't know how he ever got up there, but when he got up there, he just fell off.
The glide path of a sofa. My God.
I used to, every time he get up there, I go, "Oh, the humanity."
So he's coming back in 2015. Of course, that's when we see the Dudleys return to WWE. I was excited to see that. They got a huge pop at the Royal Rumble. It was really fun to see them take their place back in WWE. I think fans were excited to see them. They're going to work with a lot of the younger tag teams and try to help get them over. And then we even see Devon after that transition to being an agent. You were doing commentary during some of that time. Tell us about that 2015 run in WWE and how you thought Devon did behind the scenes as an agent for WWE.
Holy shit. Those guys, when they came back, I've gotten to call some of the coolest moments in the last 20, 30 years in commentary. I got to call Dolph's cash in after WrestleMania in Brooklyn. I got to call Seth's cash in at WrestleMania out in California. And I got to call the Dudleys coming back. I mean, that place went nuts. I mean, absolutely nuts. And sometimes, you sit there and you call match after match after match, and all of a sudden something historic happens and you're a part of it. First thing you want to do is not screw it up. And I mean that seriously. Like Al Michaels, when you say, "Do you believe in miracles?" What did he say next? Nothing. He laid out. For the next 90 seconds, he laid out. Sometimes you don't say anything, but the last thing you want to do is screw that up. And I remember when they came out, I'm just thinking, God, this is freaking awesome, man. This is history. And I'm also thinking, don't screw it up. Don't say anything stupid. Just, maybe let them breathe. It's a real feel thing at that point. But it was really cool to see all that and be part of that. And Devin as an agent, I always call him Devin. And, Ron, it's a great story. Ron, when he first met Devin, he goes, "Devin, how you doing?" Ron Simmons. And Devon says, "Mr. Simmons, my name's Devon." And he goes, Ron says, "That's what I said, Devin." And Devon goes, "Yes, sir, Mr. Simmons. Devin it is." so me and Ron have called him Devin for about 30 years now.
I love that. But how did he do as an agent?
I thought he did great. He has a great way about him. He has a very good way about him. And he has a way to put together matches and that makes sense. And I thought he did a good job. Is he still an agent? I mean, I don't know. I don't even know what. No. I see him all the time, and I see, the two twins he has out of his 438 children. I see the two twins all the time who are good young people. But I didn't know if Devin was still there.
No, they do have his kids do have a great business there in South Florida. It's like a mobile detailing deal that they've built over the last few years. And I see them. I think they take care of, like, as you know, John, half of the wrestling world lives in like Orlando or Tampa. Yeah. I mean, you could just serve as those guys and do well, but I think they've done really, really well as entrepreneurs there.
Hey, I'll tell you a great story with Devin. We were in Atlantic City, and we've been working our ass off, and we got heat on. I think we got heat on Bubba. I think it was. Yeah, I got heat on Bubba, and we worked, our last match. And so, we worked really hard, to make sure people left happy. Place was, fortunately, it was pretty full. As Ricky would say, hanging from the rafters. They're hanging from the rafters, sold out. But anyway, I think it was full. But I hit the tag to Ron, and Bubba hits the tag to Devin. So Devin comes in, and Ron comes in. The place pops, because we've been getting heat on Bubba. We're trying to make this, as big as we can. We want to get, put these guys over. And so Devin comes in, and as he does, Ron goes to hit him. Devin stands behind Earl Hebner, and Ron looks at him. I mean, perplexed, and he goes to go around Earl, and Devin goes behind Earl again, and he's literally, this is the comeback, and he's hiding behind Earl Hebner, and finally Ron realizes that Devin thinks that it's a false tag, not the comeback, And so Ron stops right in the middle of the ring, puts his hand on his hip as he does, and he goes, "God damn it, Devin, it's the hot tag." And then Devon looks at Ron like a scolded little child, and he goes, "Oh shit, I'm sorry, Ron." And he moves Earl aside and just starts bumping and feeding. It was the worst. It was the worst thing you ever seen in your life. Ron told him after, he goes, "You know, Devin, Trump hosted WrestleMania 4 and 5 here. You just killed the entire town. We'll never be back."
Oh, I love it so much.
It was awesome.
Where do you think, the Dudleys are going to belong in history? I mean, obviously they're Hall of Famers. They deserve every bit of that. I said up front, they were one of my absolute favorites. I grew up a big Steiner Brothers fan, but later as I guess we'd call it a teenager, man, the Dudley Boyz were my go-to. So they're on my Mount Rushmore of tag teams. They're in the Hall of Fame. Where would you think, in your opinion, as one of the great tag team wrestlers of all time, where do the Dudleys rank for you?
Mount Rushmore. You talk about the top 4. I believe they're on the top 4. There's not a doubt in my mind. Their longevity, what they've done, all the titles that they've won. You can make an argument that they're a GOAT. Legitimately make that argument. And I don't think anybody thought in the 90s after Road Warriors that anybody would ever make an argument that somebody could even be equal to the Road Warriors. And maybe they're not. That's all subjective. But I think they're right up there with the great teams, especially the great brother teams. I think Booker and Stevie obviously belong on that. And the other great teams of that era, Edge and Christian and the Hardys. I think the Steiners, people that didn't see the Steiners in the early 90s, they owned the wrestling world. They were that freaking good. There's a match with Bret Hart and Owen Hart against the Steiners in WWE that just to this day will blow you away. But Ricky and Robert, the Briscoe brothers, for all they did in Florida and so many different places. I think, there's a lot of great teams. Most of them are brother teams, by the way. But I think they are right there. I think the Road Warriors, to me, are probably number 1. And then everybody else is fighting for number 2. And I think that the Dudleys are in that fight.
The tag team match you were talking about, the Brett and Owen against the Steiner brothers, it was a Wrestling Challenge TV taping in Florence, South Carolina in January of 94. If you're looking for that, it was January 11th, 1994. They went 24 minutes and 55 seconds. That's a match that John is referencing there. I got to agree, man. I think the Dudleys, and one of the things I think that's so great about the Dudleys, and I hope this is a lesson for perhaps, aspiring young tag team wrestlers. I don't think anyone, respectfully, I've heaped love on these guys. I don't think anyone is going to necessarily confuse the Dudley Boyz, with a Bret Hart, Shawn Michaels level in-ring technician. It's a totally different presentation. I think what gets them on that Mount Rushmore is they were established characters that the audience believed in. And clearly the promotions, and I mean every promotion, whether it was here in America or in Japan or anywhere, they could be trusted with the tag titles.
Yes.
And I think the promotion being able to trust you, the audience believing in you, and you having easily identifiable characters. Like we knew who Bubba and Devon are. I think that was like the trinity that made the Dudleys successful. Am I far off base?
No, I completely agree. And the Road Warriors weren't great workers. They weren't. Those guys, they kill people is what they did. And they were very good at it. They cut good promos, and you look at what, especially what Hawk did with Hase, over in Japan. I mean, Hawk especially could work. Animal could too in what he did. He wasn't, again, not a Bret Hart, not a Shawn Michaels, but he got over like $1 million freaking dollars. And those guys were over. That Road Warrior pop was legitimate, and you have such a divergence of tag teams from Ricky and Robert to the Kangaroos to Bubba and Devon. They're all great teams, and they all got over. And like you say, when you can be trusted with those titles and carry a show anywhere, that's impressive.
Where do you rank the Dudley Death Drop as a tag team finish? It's got to be one of the best, don't you think?
Yeah.
Tag team finish?
Yeah, I can't think of anything other than the Road Warriors finish that would have been better.
Yeah, the Doomsday Device, I agree. And listen, it's a little, I mean, it wasn't nearly as high profile, but I loved Power and Glory's suplex with the splash that Herc and Paul Roma would do.
Yeah.
But obviously they didn't enjoy near the success that the Dudleys did. I think you could argue that the Dudleys had one of the most recognizable and beloved tag team finishes of all time.
Yeah, one time we were backstage, and Michael Hayes comes in, and he says, Ron, how about you take that 3D out on the floor, to set up the finish? Ron looked at Michael Hayes, Michael, get the fuck out of here. And then I think that's a no. I love Michael. Michael would come up with stuff that he would volunteer you for that probably might not be that good. He needed an OSHA guy around him.
Hey, I do want to ask you, since we're talking all things OSHA today, I don't pretend to know, and I don't want to know, but if you had to take the table bump on your back, and that's the way most people do it, you see lots of guys laying on a table and then another guy crashes through it. That's what we're used to. But when the Dudleys would do it with the table, a lot of times the guy would go forward through. If you had to pick, would you rather go through the table stomach first or back first?
Oh, back first. No doubt about it. No doubt about it. I've been through a lot of tables. I don't know if I've been through one stomach first. I don't know if I have or not. I've been through a lot of tables. Most of the time it's not that bad. Now, there is some, safety risk there. Something breaks.
Yes.
That's what happened to Finley. Finley almost lost his leg over it. But definitely my back. No doubt about it. 10 times out of 10 the back.
Did you ever see, was there ever a circumstance where you saw Bubba or Devon, quote unquote, botch? Besides that hot tag that we talked about with Ron, did anybody ever trip or anything like that you recall?
Oh my God. Yeah. Only in the most famous arena in the entire world, Madison Square Garden. Yeah. So we were working in the Garden, and I don't remember where we were on the card, but we had worked a long time. We were obviously late in the card. I don't know if we were last or not, but I doubt we were. I don't know. I don't remember. Anyway, we had worked a long time, and we had gotten really good heat, and we thought, man, we are set to rock this freaking place. So Ron hits the tag to me. Devin hits the tag to Bubba. I feed in, kind of like the old blind feed in. I'm ready for, step into a punch and start feeding and go into this comeback that we thought we had a great comeback, great finish. Bubba comes in the ring like a ball of fire and he catches his foot on the middle rope. And he doesn't catch himself at all. He lands flat on his face like this. Flat on his face, and his head lands between my feet on the ground, on the mat. The place was going, huh? Literally the whole Madison Square Garden goes, huh? And just looked at it. And Bubba's head is between my feet. And this is the worst shit ever. So freaking bad. So I'm like, okay, all right, Bubba, we're still going to do the comeback. So I'm trying to call the comeback to him about what we're going to do as an ad lib because I know he's upset. He double legs me and turns into Tank freaking Abbott. Just turns into Tank Abbott. He just starts beating the shit out of me. And I'm going, you clumsy bastard, I didn't trip you. And so I'm turning around. He just, I'm like, oh my God, would you get him off of me? So I look at Ron and go, don't come in. Just don't stay out there. Wait till he settles down. So Bubba just beats me half to death. Like it's my fault that he tripped on the ropes. So anyway, we do the finish. It is terrible, horrible. Horrible in the Garden. So we come to the back, and Bubba is beside himself, man. He's just depressed. That poor man needs to see a doctor. He's so bad. And he's like, oh my God, this is horrible. It's the worst thing. And Ron's like, no, Bubba. With that James Earl Jones voice, that reassuring James Earl Jones voice. He goes, now, Bubba, come on now. It's not that bad. And Bubba goes, Ron, I was here when Jimmy Snuka jumped off the cage. It's the most famous arena in the world. I love this arena. I always want to wrestle in this arena. He goes, all my girlfriend, her whole family's here. All my college buddies were at ringside. And Ron goes, yeah, that's bad. That's real bad.
I forgot about that, but you're right. Bully Ray was one of the guys, like Mick Foley, who was in Madison Square Garden when Snuka leaped off the top of the cage. Another reason to love Bully Ray. I know he's a controversial figure at times online, but the dude loves wrestling, and we sure do love the Dudleys here on the program. Hey, let's do some questions. We've got a bunch of them rolling in. We are going to hit some news and notes from what's happening in wrestling today too. We'll start with this one, which is a little fun for you. Fletcher wants to know, if you captain Team Texas and Jerry Briscoe captain Team Oklahoma, in a Survivor Series 5-on-5, who was on your team? And could the Team Oklahoma even count to 5?
Hell no, they couldn't count to 5. And how are they going to know that they're wrestling us? None of them some bitches can read either. They're from Oklahoma.
Let me give some breaking news here. I don't think we've revealed this anywhere. You know, John, but we've not said it out loud for anyone to hear. StarCast is just a couple of weeks away. Go grab your bracelets right now at starrcast.com. I'm going to be there. John's going to be there. You can get a gold bracelet. You can get a platinum bracelet. We've got a whole slate of events. This year, we're even including some free meet and greets you don't want to miss out on. But one of the things I'm excited about, you might even say one of the crown jewels of what we're doing, and we're doing it on Saturday, July 12th in Arlington, is a God Bless Texas panel. And when we're talking about a Team Texas Survivor Series and this hypothetical question from Fletcher, let me tell you who's going to be on stage together for the first time ever. Of course, Mr. Layfield. I mean, we couldn't do it without the wrestling god himself, former WWE champion. But how about Dory Funk Jr. joining him on stage? Can you even talk about Texas without the Funks? And if you're going to be talking about Texas, you got to be talking about the Von Erichs. Kevin Von Erich is going to be there on stage at Dory Funk's shoulder, sitting right down from Mr. Layfield. And to round out the panel, how about the incomparable? Is this going to be the most fun panel you've ever been involved with, John? It's got to be up there.
I would fly to Sri Lanka to be on this fucking panel. Are you kidding me? This is the greatest panel I've ever heard of. And I'm on this sumbitch. I am shocked. You got Stan Hansen, Dory Funk, and Kevin Von Erich. You got a Von Erich, a Funk, and the bad man from Borger. I am in shock every day that I'm on this panel with these guys. This is so freaking cool. I can't wait to see them all. You know, I've got to tag with Terry. I got to wrestle Stan. I got to wrestle Kevin many times. I mean, this is really cool for a kid who grew up idolizing specifically these three guys. This is huge for me. I cannot wait to be part of this.
It's happening at StarCast. And by the way, we're going to give you an opportunity to do a pro photo op with all of these Texas legends. It's never happened before. If you grew up a Texas wrestling fan, or you were a fan of the Von Erichs, you were a fan of the Funks, you were a fan of Stan Hansen, or you're a fan of JBL, realistically, will you ever get a chance to do this again?
Cool.
We're so excited to have you, and it's happening on Friday, July 11th and Saturday, July 12th. The panel and the meet and greets are both going to be on Saturday, July 12th. And I know what you're thinking. Hey, isn't that the day that All In is happening? It is. We're doing it that morning. The AEW pay-per-view is in the afternoon. And, of course, that evening, we know, is Goldberg's last match. This is going to be an incredible day in professional wrestling history. We want you to come join us. I mean, think about that. You're going to get the once-in-a-lifetime Texas panel with guys who've never shared a stage together, never done a photo op together, a truly once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. And then moments later, you'll see AEW's first stadium show in America. And then that night, holy cow, Goldberg's retirement match on Saturday night's main event. Is it title versus career? I don't know. Is this really his last match? I don't know. But I know for sure it's in Atlanta, and Goldberg's getting a title shot. I mean, this feels like we're in a damn simulation, John. July 12th, join us, be a part of this. You want to be able to say that you were there and you got to experience live and in person. It's starrcast.com, starrcast.com. Grab yourself a platinum bracelet, grab yourself a gold bracelet. Don't you dare miss it. StarCast coming your way. Man, I'm fired up for that, dude. That's going to be one of the cooler panels we've ever put together. If you really love the history of pro wrestling, this is living, breathing history every 18 inches on that stage, is it not?
This isn't one of the cooler panels I've ever been a part of. This is the coolest thing I've ever done. I can tell you, I just want to call all my buddies that, from Sweetwater and tell them, all the wrestlers that we grew up watching, I'm about to be on a panel with them. It's shocking. I remember the first time I stood across from Kevin Von Erich in the Sportatorium, and I remember thinking, oh my God, man, I remember watching this guy with my grandfather, thinking one day I would like to be in the ring with. And I never dreamed I'd be in the ring with him. I just want to be in the ring. And I remember the first time I walked out with Terry Funk in Austin, and the place went. This is how stupid I am. The place went crazy, and I thought, damn, I'm getting over. Then I realized I walked out with Terry Funk. And I literally just walked to the ring by myself. Nobody even noticed I'd walked to the ring. They're all watching Terry Funk. And I remember sitting there in Budokan when Stan Hansen came out romping and stomping. And, brother, you ain't never seen nothing like Stan Hansen unless he comes out romping and stomping in a place like Budokan. And I'm sitting there. I'm thinking, he's coming for me. I don't care. I don't care. This is awesome. I am so excited about this, Conrad. I can't thank you enough and everybody enough to allow me to be a part of it. This is going to be a huge treat for me. And I'm sure for all the fans. I don't know when you'll ever get these legends together again. You may not. It's just a matter of logistics, not just age and all that stuff. And so this is a historic event. This reminds me of when they had the big celebrity battle royal with Lou Thez and those guys that Vince talks about and Pat Patterson put together. I mean, this is pretty cool history that you're a part of, that I get to be a part of with Stan and Dory and Kevin.
It really is going to be a blast. I hope you guys will join us at starcast.com. It's funny, a little peek behind the curtain. When I had this idea, this hypothetical, I called and pitched John. And this will be the first time John has joined us at a Starcast, because previously he's always been under contract and wasn't otherwise available. Now he is available, so I jumped at the chance. And when we got to the business end and we had to discuss the uncomfortableness that sometimes has to exist in these sort of conversations, John was like, "You're putting me on the stage with a Funk, with a Von Erich, and with Stan Hansen. You don't have to pay me. Hell, I'll pay you."
You damn right.
You got to go grab your bracelet right now. You're going to have a blast. I can't wait for you to be there at starcast.com. You won't regret it. Hey, I want to ask you another question or two here about the Dudleys. We are still live if you've got questions for John. Cody wants to know, John, is there anything that the Dudley Boyz didn't do in their career that you think they would have flourished in? Maybe a different type match, a new promotion, a great team they never faced. Is there any other box to check that you can think of, John, that the Dudleys didn't hit?
No. We're talking about a full career. I mean, you always wonder, if guys that work in just one or two places, how they would have done elsewhere. You assume a guy can get over one place, they can get over somewhere else. If a guy doesn't get over, you assume probably the same thing, that they can't get over somewhere else. Dudley's got over everywhere they were. Everywhere they were champions. And everything they've done, they've been great at. I mean, it's a really incredible testament to their career. I will tell you a funny story. We were running in, we used to always, bump cars and go down the road, and, rental cars. So I pulled up right next to the Dudleys one time, like right next to them. I was trying to, touch our rear view mirrors, on the sides, knock their, to hit them, And anyway, didn't think anything of it. We're just messing with them. Next thing I know, we're driving through Philadelphia, going pretty fast. I don't know how fast we're going, more than the speed limit, whatever it was. And my door opens. I'm driving down the highway. Bubba Dudley had crawled out of the passenger window, and he's hanging out, and he's pulled my door open, and he's trying to come in the car with me as we're going down the road. I don't know how fast we're going. I don't know, 40 miles an hour, 70 miles an hour, whatever it was. We're going fast enough where he dies if he hits the pavement. And Ronald goes, he ain't all there, is he? And I said, no, he's not. He's a good guy.
I absolutely love that we're spending some time talking about the Dudleys. And I want to mention, I saw a tweet over the weekend that came out that basically said, I think this is from Bully Ray doing an interview somewhere, that the Dudleys are open to a return for one final run in the WWE. I would love to see that. I would love to see them get a proper send-off. I think it makes a whole lot of sense. I am curious if they were going to have one final run, and we'll boil it down to one quote unquote last match. If you were booking, who would you put the Dudleys in there with one last time?
Usos. Not a doubt in my mind. I think the Usos, they're going to be in the talk. It depends on how much they do singles wise. I think they'd be in the talk, the same we talked about with the Mount Rushmore of wrestling. I mean, Rikishi's kids, those kids are awesome. Kids are grown men now. Those guys are freaking awesome. I would love to see, in my opinion, the greatest tag team of the modern era. I say modern times, whatever we want to call that, against one of the greatest tag teams of all time. I think it'd be awesome to see those teams.
Man, sign me up. That sounds like a lot of fun. And if you wanted to recreate some of the craziness of the three ways, listen, they're in TNA. If the Hardys are around, the Hardys, the Dudleys, the Usos, I don't know. It could be fun.
The Hardys are just as good as they've ever been. I mean, just as good as they've ever been. I would love to see that.
Hey, I wanted to ask you, we're talking about current wrestling today too. there are a lot of people who have, and we've even got questions in the live chat here today. Do you think perhaps Rikishi and some of the comments he's made about the way Jay has been booked, do you think that could potentially hurt Jay in WWE? Like, if you've got a protective father out there, a loving father out there, because that's the place this is coming from,
yep,
trying to be in defense of his son, and he's sort of being critical of creative and saying that, if creative can't come up with anything better than that for him, then they should be fired and that sort of thing. That puts heat on Jay. I mean, I know that Rikishi is coming from a good place, but doesn't that put heat on Jay, or am I wrong on that?
I don't know. I mean, Rikishi's one of the most loved guys there is, and yes, he's a father sticking up for his son. I don't have any issue with that. And if I was in creative right now, I wouldn't have any issue with that.
Good.
I might call him and say, hey, look, here's what we're doing, or maybe out of respect. I don't know. I think Rikishi's sticking up for his son, and that's very admirable for a father. And Rikishi is a wonderful human being that I love very much, and I admire the fact that he's sticking up for his son. And if I'm part of creative, Rikishi has a big following.
Yeah.
I mean, you create this huge dynamic that people now all of a sudden talking more about Jey Uso.
Yes.
And so I certainly don't think it hurts him. I think he can't do anything but help him. His dad's a Hall of Famer talking about him.
No doubt about it. And it is interesting to think about the parallels because, we saw what happened when we split the Dudleys apart. Clearly Bubba Ray got the spotlight on him a little more maybe than Devin did, as you call it. It feels like that's happened with Jay and Jimmy. So I am curious, are they going to slide Jay back into a tag team, or will he continue the singles run? We'll see. I do want to talk to you a little bit about some of the other news and notes that have been put out there, specifically Nick Khan doing an interview last week. He was with Stephanie McMahon, and he basically said that he encourages the creative team, and WWE encourages the creative team to not program for social media critics, but for the universe. Quote, we encourage our creative team and writers, don't program for that, program for the universe, not for a small portion of the universe who wants to criticize you. That doesn't matter. Move on. Put on a good product. The money will be there. The fans will be there. The results will be there. And I think that was proven out when, there was a lot of criticism about the speculation of a Goldberg return. But when Goldberg's music hit, man, people went banana, as Pat Patterson would say. I mean, I know this is preaching to the choir, but this has probably been the Vince McMahon way of doing things, the Eric Bischoff way of doing things for a long time. Don't, quote unquote, book for the internet. Where do you land on that?
These phones have ruined so much. I go to restaurants all the time, and I see a couple there of all ages. I'm talking about 20 years old to 70 years old. And you sit there and you see a man and a woman sitting there, and they're sitting there on their phone at dinner together. And I think, what a bunch of bullshit. What a bullshit way to go through life. Enjoy life. There's nothing. You had your phone all with you all day, and now you still have to have it at dinner when you're sitting there with, somebody that you could be talking to and enjoying life with. Life's finite. We're not here forever. But I think what the problem with the phone is, this thing is so personal to people. All of a sudden it appears on my phone, and it says either one of two things. If it's a feedback about a wrestling thing. Oh, you're a bad guy. You're a horrible person. You're an asshole, or you're this, or you're that, or man, you're really getting over. You think, man, this is great, man. Did you see this? It's on your phone. So I think it feels more personal than just something that you're reading, say, on the internet, even though it is on the internet. I understand that, but I understand what I'm saying. It's just, you get it on your phone and you think the feedback, but I've talked to guys many times. I was sitting there with a guy one time, and he said, man, my phone blew up over this thing. I said, okay, let's go through this. How many people responded to this? And he goes, my timeline's full. I said, let's count them. So we counted them. It was like 43 different people. And I said, how many followers do you have? He goes, like 1.2 million. And I said, really? And I said, now, if there's an algorithm that tells you that these 43 people that responded equate to 800,000 people of your 1.2 million, I get that. There's not that algorithm. Maybe these 43 people were actually 20 people that tweeted twice or X twice, whatever you call it now. But people look at that and it's outsized proportion amount of response and feedback and credibility you give to what appears on your phone. And I think that ruins a lot of things. And I think people have to put that in perspective, that the overall audience, Vince would tell you, we have a test case every single day we walk out there. It's called the crowd. And you know right away what's working and what's not. And because you get something here, I don't respond to people. Look, I'm the perfect demo. If I go to a show, I don't care about, if the ticket price is $70 or $80, whatever it is, I'm going to pay it, and I'm going to buy a beer and a hot dog. I'm going to buy a shirt and all this stuff. I'm not going to tweet anybody. I'm not going to send a note to anybody. I'm just either going to enjoy it or I'm not. I'm the type of person that you want to cater to. And we lose that sometimes because it seems so personal when it's on the phone.
Wow. I appreciate that perspective. I also want to ask you about something that maybe it was just said in passing, but man, I thought jumped off the page. And I know that you're in the circle, or used to be. So maybe you're a great person to ask. During that same interview between Nick Khan and Stephanie McMahon on her podcast, What's Your Story? Nick said that he had only admiration for Vince, talking about his business accomplishments. And Stephanie is really quick to quip, probably his biggest nemesis is himself. Do you feel like at times Vince McMahon, like a lot of us, is his own worst enemy?
Yeah. Yeah, I think so. I mean, he's also his biggest advocate too.
Oh, for sure.
Vince believed in himself. Vince you understand, Vince wasn't a guy who came from money. His father promoter, but his father didn't raise him.
Right.
And he failed a lot. He failed in business in the 70s. He failed with the Evel Knievel jump. He failed with the Inoki fight. And then all of a sudden he goes to Cape Cod and he kind of learns the business, and he comes back and he has the greatest success in the history of wrestling. I mean, everything we have, almost everything we have today is because of Vince. He helped create the pay-per-view model. He helped create the closed circuit model. He helped create the over-the-top model that Netflix uses to this day. But yeah, Vince didn't always play well with others. He didn't suffer fools. And when people would sit there and try to talk over him, oh my God. I remember one time I was sitting there talking to him and I was pissed off because somebody I thought had treated me poorly because I was a wrestler, putting quotation marks. And I remember sitting there talking to Vince about it. And Vince goes, listen, when you're in their world, you have to be, you can't take something that's said about you as a wrestler in that world. You got to understand, you got to make it on your own in that world. And I said, Vince, how would you feel if somebody just kind of treated you like an old wrestling promoter? And he bowed up on me. I said, you can't even stand me saying that term. It's so offensive to you. And it was. Vince had this Vince didn't have a chip on his shoulder. He had a granite block on his shoulder. And at times he didn't play well with others. I don't blame him. I love what he did. I've seen him in so many meetings and different things where he would run some of these freaking Ivy League idiots out of the building, basically. Was it a right thing to do for business? I don't know. It was fun.
Let's do another question.
And by the way, I really love what Nick Khan said in so much of that interview. That guy is he is a rainmaker, man. I mean, that guy prints money. They are so lucky to have the team of him and Hunter together. I mean, and Airy and all these guys. But man, what a great thing that WWE has with Nick Khan. And I loved what he said about responsibility. Love what he said about problems, about how it's a shared problem. And I loved what he said about how they judge their response to their creative. I just thought Nick has a really good grasp on things.
Yeah, he even talked about business mistakes. Nick was quoted in that interview saying, Triple H and I, we make mistakes in business every day. The good thing is we have one another. We can say, hey, I think I did this. What do you think? I don't think that was the move. Maybe we can think of it the other way. Let's try that. I do like the idea that you've got somebody to sort of bounce ideas off of. And somebody else who's been bouncing ideas around is Vince McMahon. It's come out that he recently tried to purchase controlling interest in bare knuckle fighting championships. This was all revealed in an interview with David Feldman, BKFC's founder and president. He confirmed to Justin Barrasso, friend of the show, that a meeting had occurred and that McMahon was resolute about a return to promoting. Quote, he's a great guy. His whole team is great, but the timing wasn't right for us. And he's Vince McMahon. If I were him, I'd want creative control too. He was awesome, very complimentary, and he was very serious to do business. Shout out to Justin Barrasso at his Substack. I encourage you, if you haven't already, go check out Justin's work. Just Google Undisputed Substack, Justin Barrasso, and you'll see it. Previously with Sports Illustrated, but doing his own thing now, and super proud to see him enjoying so much success. But you said it here several weeks ago, months ago now at this point. Hey, I don't see Vince going quietly into the night. The idea that he was interested in acquiring bare knuckle fighting championships. What do you think? Are we going to see Vince get back into wrestling, or will it be a different type of combat sports, John?
First of all, what idiot would turn Vince McMahon down? And I mean that. You're the greatest promoter in the history of promotion. This guy's a freaking blows P.T. Barnum away. And Vince wouldn't like that analogy. That's a compliment from me. Vince is a guy who took sports entertainment. He created sports entertainment. And you have a chance for him to step in and help you with your company. I don't get it. I don't get it at all why anybody would turn Vince down. Does he want creative control? I want him to have creative control. I want him to have control of everything. That's what he does. He's one of the best operators in the history of entertainment. And the team he puts together, it's shocking. People talk about it being a one-man band. It wasn't a one-man band. The reason Vince beat the territories was because Vince put together some of the great business minds into sports and into entertainment that help, defeat. He was going against wrestling companies. That's why Vince won. And do I think he gets involved in something again? Two things. One, I hope he does. And two, yes. Vince ain't going quietly into the night. I don't see it. I don't care if he's 120. He ain't going quietly into the night. And I hope he isn't. I think, to me, the entertainment world is a lot better with Vince McMahon in it. I want him in it, and I hope that he does find a way to get into it. Whether it's wrestling or not, I don't know.
Well, stay tuned. I do want to ask you about John Cena's pipe bomb promo last week. But before we do, John, I saved the best for last. An overwhelming response to Friday Night SmackDown. John Cena made one of his final appearances in WWE, and they used this as an opportunity to recreate the infamous pipe bomb that happened on June 27th, 2011. So almost 14 years ago, we recreated that, except instead of John Cena, or CM Punk rather, sitting Indian style. Maybe I shouldn't have said that, but whatever the PC version of that is, you know what I mean.
It's Briscoe style.
Briscoe style. There you go. Well, we know that he did that at the top of the ramp. And this time, John did it with CM Punk crashed out on its Slim Jim table right in the middle of the ring on SmackDown. And he made sure to give a shout out and break the fourth wall, except instead of saying hi to Colt Cabana like CM Punk did once upon a time 14 years ago, he gave a shout out to Claudio Castagnoli, who works for AEW. He gave a shout out to Nick Nemeth, who works for TNA, and he gave a shout out to the indie god, Matt Cardona. I think the internet ran crazy with a bunch of conspiracy theories saying, oh, well, that CC and Claudio Castagnoli was in code to say Colt Cabana, and that Matt Cardona and Nick Nemeth was in code for the Young Bucks. I think a little of that was a little tinfoil hat. In reality, Punk actually named those guys on the way to WrestleMania 29 in a press interview. So somebody in WWE Creative did their research, and over the weekend, we saw both of these guys at Fanatics Fest, and Punk basically said he's got a response ready for Monday night, which is tonight, and he's more of an Ice Cube guy. He referenced the battle rap song, the diss track, No Vaseline. I think people are excited to see what's going to happen with Punk in this promo. And of course, there is the underlying controversy of just the idea of Punk in a Saudi Arabia show, which right now seems to be in question. There's a lot to unpack in this promo. You saw the promo. What did you think? What was your reaction? And what do you think about it today as it builds towards the pay-per-view this Saturday?
I thought it was fantastic. You sent me a thing that had like 51 million views at one point, and I'm sure it's significantly more than that, whatever it was. That's incredible. But one of the reasons that you had that is because you've had two guys with incredible careers, intricate careers that have touched a lot of lives. You know, if you had two guys come out there that all of a sudden try to cut this promo, these pipe bomb promos. You couldn't do it. The reason that these guys can do it is because they have an incredible intertwined history, and they have a history of doing so many incredible things in the business. So now all of a sudden you have these great legends taking shots at each other. I thought it was fantastic. And Cena has always been one of the greatest promos. So has CM Punk. I think the response is going to be great tonight. And I think they're creating a lot of interest. I mean, the thing about it is, who's the heel in this? Don't know. Don't care. That's the good part. You don't care. They're two attractions, and attractions can, those guys, there's a world of difference between babyface, heels, and attractions. Roman Reigns is an attraction. He also headlined more WrestleManias than anybody in history. So an attraction does pretty well. The NWO was an attraction. The Freebirds were an attraction. A lot of history for attractions drawing huge pay-per-view buy rates. It's not a pay-per-view anymore, but drawing huge crowds and drawing huge presence, which is, their social media, hundreds of millions of views you get. I think it's incredible. I think you got two of the best of all time, and they're going to have a lot of fun tearing each other apart, and the fans are really going to enjoy this.
I can't wait to see what happens. The entire world is talking about this promo. And what I love is when you can get people, even now in 2025, hanging on every word saying, what does it mean? I mean, that's the cliffhanger that keeps us going for today, because now I think most people who are going to be watching Monday Night Raw tonight, yes, there's going to be a lot of great stuff. I know they've advertised that Cody's going to wrestle Jey Uso as they build towards this King of the Ring and all that jazz. But the idea that we're all waiting to see Punk's response, man, it just proves once again how valuable character work and promos really are. Because I don't think we're as jazzed about any of the physicality of the matches tonight as we are hearing Punk's response.
100%. And it's almost like the great literary piece. A great literary piece that's written, certain literary pieces, you say children can play in it, elephants can drown in it. And that's when you get something that is really cool, because you look at it superficially and you go, okay, I get this. You got this great legend in John Cena, you got this great legend in CM Punk. They want to fight each other. But then if you really want to go deep in it, you can go down a rabbit hole as far as you want to go. Wait a minute. Did this mean that? Did that mean this? And all of a sudden now you can play in it. It's still literally analogy. Children can play in it. Elephants can drown in it. That's when it's really well done.
I love that analogy. I will be using it. I can't wait to see it tonight. And I really honestly just hope that Punk finally got off that table. I mean,
he was there forever. Oh my God, would I hate to have been him. He did actually a really good job.
Yes.
I don't know what. I was sitting there watching him going, oh my God, if I was him, that had to seem like he was there for 4 hours.
It's got to feel almost like you're laying there naked.
Oh.
It's got to be the most uncomfortable few minutes of your entire career.
And you're going, do I keep selling? How long is he going to go? Would you please go home?
Yes.
Oh, my God.
I can't wait to see what happens. We're going to be talking about it, the good, the bad, and the ugly. And I can't wait to see what happens Saturday. I hope that everybody's safe. I hope that Night of Champions comes off without a hitch. And I know that we're going to be talking about it next week. We're going to be doing it live. I hope you'll join us here next Monday. As a process, we're trying every chance we get to do this live. We want you to be a part of what we're doing. Join us at somethingtowrestle.com. And that's going to do it for us, man. Thank you so much for everybody showing up and hanging out early on a Monday morning. We tried to do justice to the Dudleys. I'm fired up for Night of the Champions. It's a good time to be a wrestling fan right now, John.
It's a great time to be a wrestling fan. I've got a first pitch I'm throwing out for the Madison Mallards on Thursday, and I'm not doing that to promote the show. I'm just hoping that I don't end up with 50 cent and throw it into the concession stand or something.
Hey, in the meantime, be getting those questions ready and hit us with them on social media at Pritchard Show. Anywhere you enjoy social media, find us there and fire off your questions for John. Next week, we're throwing you guys the keys to the kingdom as we do Ask John Anything. So if you asked a question today and we missed it, we'll dig through those as well. Just be sure to use hashtag AskJBL and stay tuned. We'll see you next week right here on Something to Wrestle with John Layfield.